Chapter 114. For the sake of Long Houchen's safety, Kar lowered her voice and explained, he was forced. Yi Xiaolei didn't buy it. I only saw the truth. How annoying, we can't leave this place now. Hearing her words, Kair was a little confused, but still asked, how is Long Houchen? Yi Xiaolei said, he's fine. He just used an ability that exceeded his limits. However, you should be envious of his current state. This is a deep level of enlightenment, and it has nothing to do with his attribute. Although his body is in danger of collapsing. But with my life force, he's fine. Let him stay like this. If I'm not wrong, it's very likely that he's about to awaken. Awaken? Kair looked at Yi Xiaolei in surprise. What's awakening? Yi Xiaolei giggled. I can tell you, but take off your veil and let me see who's prettier. Kair was stunned, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. But from Yi Xiaolei's tone, she could tell that it was a good thing for Long Houchen to maintain his current state. But she still took off her veil. She didn't know anything about awakening, and this information was obviously very important to Long Houchen. Looking at Kair's beautiful face, Yi Xiaolei was stunned for a moment, then said with some annoyance, so annoying, I can't grow up, otherwise I wouldn't be any worse than you. Obviously, she thought that she couldn't compare to Kair. Looking at her cute appearance, Kair couldn't help but gently stroke her head. Then why can't you grow up? Yi Xiaolei's expression changed. I'm not telling you, it's a secret. But I keep my word, you don't even know about awakening. It's such a waste to have such a good talent. Don't you and him both have divine physiques? If you don't awaken, how can you use the abilities bestowed by divine physiques? Divine physique? This was undoubtedly a new term. If Long Houchen could hear it now, he would definitely recall the word divine favor in Electrolux's message in the Tower of Eternity. You're saying that those with an innate internal spiritual energy of 90 and above are blessed by the gods? Kair asked curiously. This was not only related to Long Houchen but also to herself. Yi Xiaolei was a little confused. I don't know what innate spiritual energy is, but I can feel it. You and him both have divine physique. Maybe it was a different way of saying things. As the name suggests, the divine favor constitution means that you have received the blessing of God. It is the best talent that you humans can obtain. However, the blessed constitution could only be used to its full potential after it was awakened. For example, if he had decided on his own talent long ago, that guy from before might not have been his match in a one-on-one fight. However, that hateful, filthy dark creature is truly disgusting. Moreover, there's actually another one that can temporarily tear apart the space here. At the mention of the Demon Emperor, her eyes couldn't help but show a hint of fear. Kair said, that's the Demon Emperor of demons. If Long Houchen and I awaken our physiques, what benefits will there be? Yi Xiaolei said, there are many benefits. After awakening the blessed constitution, it means that you can borrow the power of God who favors you. Of course, the degree of borrowing varies according to your own strength. You guys are really ignorant. Let me explain a little more. The origin of the blessed constitution is said to be the successor chosen by God. If you cultivate it to the extreme, you will become a godlike existence. God? Is there really a God? Kair mumbled. Yi Xiaolei stuck out her tongue. Of course there is. However, there's nothing good about becoming a god. Becoming a god means becoming one with heaven and earth, completely fusing with the attribute you control. It's better to be a human. Gods seem to be able to control and rule over everything, but aren't they still unable to break the rules? Otherwise, the godhood will collapse. How can it be as free and colorful as you humans? That's why gods can be considered to exist, and can also be considered not to exist. Of course, there are some people who, in order to escape, don't completely become a god, and only maintain a demigod state. They are free and unfettered in the world. However, this kind of demigod will be suppressed by God. Sooner or later, they will become a god. I feel like I'm in a mess. Anyway, let me tell you, becoming a god isn't a good thing. As a blessed, you guys shouldn't be too powerful. Otherwise, once the godhood descends, all that's left is endless loneliness and solitude. You will also be restricted by powerful rules. To put it simply, every element around you is actually a part of God. Our world is constructed by the fusion of various gods. When you truly become a god, even your original memories might disappear. Kair said, "Just now, when the demon emperor tore apart the illusory paradise to save those demons, he mentioned godhood. You also said godhood. He seemed to want to obtain godhood. Why do you say that becoming a god isn't good?" Yi Xiaolei's eyes clearly showed some fear. That guy is different. His aura clearly doesn't belong to our world, and is not restricted by the rules of our world. But he also can't obtain the godhood of our world. If he really obtains a godhood and fuses it with himself, causing his strength to have a breakthrough, I'm afraid he will really become the eternal ruler of this world. No one can restrict him anymore. At this point, Yi Xiaolei's eyes suddenly became deep. She looked at Kair, and then looked at Long Haochen beside her. She frowned, as if thinking about something. Kair could see that this little girl seemed to have something very important that she didn't say. But, to her, be it gods or godhoods, they were still very distant things. Doesn't godhood only belong to God? Why can there be a godhood that can be seized by him? Kair asked doubtfully. Yi Xiaolei suddenly became a little irritable. There are some special circumstances. Alright, don't ask any more. I've already told you what you need to know. In any case, it's best that you don't become gods in the future. As for that guy, he's just wishful thinking. It's not that easy to seize a godhood. At most, I'll... At this point, she suddenly stopped talking. She glanced at Kair with some vigilance, and then shut her mouth. Kair refused to let it go and asked, "Then what's the limit of becoming a god?" Yi Xiaolei glanced at her, but this time she didn't answer. Kair suddenly smiled faintly. "Actually, I do know." Yi Xiaolei snorted disdainfully. "With your current strength, how can you know? 1,000,000 spiritual energy points, right?" Kair said with a smile. Yi Xiaolei looked at her in shock. Her expression had already betrayed her inner thoughts. On the contrary, Kair didn't ask any more questions. She walked to Long Haochen's side, sat cross-legged, and closed her eyes to cultivate. Since Long Haochen was fine, she was relieved. The others had been listening to the conversation between Kair and Yi Xiaolei, and their expressions changed. However, this state could only be maintained for a very short period of time. After all, God was still too far away from them. Time passed in the dream paradise. Yi Xiaolei seemed to be a little bored as she sat at the side. A total of 8 spiritual stoves were quietly revolving around her body, as if they were listening to her orders. She didn't say that she would let the 21st general-level monster hunters absorb these spiritual stoves, nor did she take them back. No one knew what she was thinking about. However, from her gaze drifting to Long Haochen from time to time, it could be seen that what she was thinking about must be related to Long Haochen. A day passed just like that. Finally, when the first light of dawn appeared in the distant sky on the 3rd day, changes appeared on Long Haochen's body. The light of dawn was filled with the joy of new life. When the soft light gradually appeared, Long Haochen's body also lit up, as if he was another rising sun. The pair of spiritual wings that could shine with bright light quietly stretched out behind him. The soft light wings extended slightly, and seemed to be a little bigger than before. The light of dawn also strangely converged, and actually fell on him alone. Whether it was the dream paradise or the others, they all felt that the originally bright sky had suddenly darkened. Only the straight golden light connected Long Haochen and the rising sun. Yi Xiaolei sat on a branch as if she was weightless. Her eyes also lit up because of the strange changes that occurred on Long Haochen's body. That's right, he really has awakened. Bathed in the golden light, Long Haochen gradually stopped his slashing motion. He stood up straight and spread his arms to his sides. Bathed in the increasingly bright golden sunlight, his entire body was also dyed gold. The dense golden light spread from his body, gradually forming circles of golden ripples that rippled out from his body. Sima Xian and Han Yu very naturally sat down cross-legged 10 meters away from Long Haochen. A golden pattern also lit up on their foreheads. It was obvious that they were affected by the retainer contract, and it was definitely a good thing. The spiritual wings on their backs quickly unfurled. Bathed in the faint golden halo that Long Haochen emitted, they quickly entered a meditative state. Zhang Fangfang's body had already basically recovered, but he was still a little weak. With Wang Yuanyuan's support, he looked at the three enviously and slowly closed his eyes, feeling the changes in the light element in the air. At this moment, he felt as if his body was immersed in an ocean of light. There was only an endless amount of light element around him, gently lapping at his body. This was a wonderful feeling that he had never experienced before, and a trace of comprehension also surged into his mind. Transparent golden light gradually emitted from his body, and he hurriedly sat down cross-legged on the ground. A pair of spiritual wings that were much larger than those of Sima Xian and Han Yu unfurled on his back. 9 light patterns gradually appeared on Long Haochen's forehead. They were purple at first, but they quickly turned golden. The surface of his skin also seemed to be inlaid with a layer of gold leaf, and even his appearance couldn't be seen clearly. The sunlight became stronger and stronger, and the golden color on Long Haochen's body also became more and more intense. Under his feet, a golden ring of light gradually took shape. This ring of light was very special. Within the gorgeous golden light, the patterns on the edges were like rays of sunlight, dense gold and dazzling patterns. In the center, the position under Long Haochen's feet was even more dazzling with golden light. An illusory golden figure gradually appeared above his head. The figure looked somewhat similar to the light elemental spirit Yiting, but it was very illusory, and couldn't be seen clearly. At a height of about 3 meters, the body that emitted a gentle golden halo slowly descended, and gradually became one with Long Haochen. A low moan came from Yiting's mouth. Ever since Long Haochen entered the state of awakening, she had been floating in the air. Just now, when Long Haochen officially began the awakening ceremony, her face was already filled with surprise. Seeing the golden figure fuse with Long Haochen's body, Yiting's body also began to change. Drops of golden liquid separated from Long Haochen's body and fused with Yiting's body. Her entire body seemed to have been remolded. Her size didn't change, but she had completely lost the original illusory feeling. Not only that, but Yiting's right hand also had a small golden staff. The style of the staff was very simple. The straight handle was similar to Yiting's height, and at the top was a diamond-shaped golden gem that shone brightly. In addition, there was also a golden gem in the center of Yiting's forehead. There was also a small ring of light under her feet, exactly the same as the one under Long Haochen's feet. But these weren't her biggest changes. On her body, the biggest change was in her aura. Originally, she only had an elemental aura, but at this moment, her body actually emitted a rich aura of life. She was no longer an intelligent light elemental spirit, but a real spirit, a light spirit. From this moment on, she was no longer Long Haochen's auxiliary spiritual stove. Instead, she was a spirit that could directly attack the enemy, support her teammates, and had her own life. Of course, she was still Long Haochen's contracted spiritual stove, and this wouldn't change. After leaving Long Haochen and losing the protection of the Son of Light, she was afraid that she could only return to her original form. A long moan suddenly sounded from Long Haochen's mouth. Yiting also raised her head and let out a moan that sounded like a murmur. Then, a strange scene appeared. First, it appeared on Yiting's body. Under her original 2 pairs of light wings, another pair of light wings appeared. The delicate new wings gradually stretched out, and her entire aura suddenly underwent an earth-shattering change. Her body became a little taller, and she was already close to a meter. The gem on her forehead became a little more angular, and some gorgeous patterns began to appear on the staff in her hand. Yes, with the help of Long Houchen's awakening, Yiting evolved again. This was already her third evolution after following Long Houchen. The changes were not only on her body. What was even more bizarre was that on Long Houchen's back, the originally huge light wings slowly rose up, and another pair of light wings actually extended from under the original light wings. Similar to Yiting's light wings, they also extended out from the tip of the sword. The golden feathers on the two pairs of light wings became much denser, and as they flapped gently, there was a faint, magnificent golden pattern emitted. The spiritual wings of a human powerhouse could actually become two pairs? It was also at this moment that a golden pillar of light suddenly shot into the sky not far behind Long Houchen. It was Zhang Fangfang. Under the cover of the dense golden pillar of light, his body slowly floated off the ground, and the golden spiritual wings on his back suddenly expanded a little. His entire body instantly became transparent, and then slowly returned to normal. However, his right arm still maintained a transparent state, as if it was carved out of a piece of golden crystal. Yes, the body of radiant light. Under the influence of the awakening of Long Houchen's God-blessed physique, in addition to the accumulation of his own strength and the stimulation of consecutive battles, Zhang Fangfang finally broke through the level 7 bottleneck that had restricted him for a long time, and successfully broke through to become a level 7 temple knight. This could be said to be a pleasant surprise. Although Han Yu and Sima Xian, who were also light elementalists, did not make such great progress as breaking through, the light elemental aura around their bodies had clearly become much more solid. The straight golden pillar of light gradually dissipated, and the sun shone on the earth again, bringing light to the illusory paradise. Long Houchen also slowly opened his eyes. The moment he opened his eyes, there seemed to be two golden lightning flashing in the sky, but it quickly returned to normal. Turning his head to look at Ke, who had a look of concern on her face, Long Houchen said apologetically, "I've made you worry." Kai did not say anything. She just silently stuck to his shoulder and held his hand tightly. This surprising change had not occurred to Long Houchen before. Witnessing a bough persistently attacking the mountain top, feeling the thick aura of life in the air, and the light elemental mist attracted by Yiting, he only felt that he had entered a wonderful state at that time. When he saw a bough transform into the heaven-defying demon dragon, he already had the intention to retreat. He had to be responsible for his companions. Therefore, he was ready to activate the eternal melody ahead of time, and bring his companions and Yi Xiaolei to the Tower of Eternity together. However, when he entered that wonderful state, he suddenly felt that if he retreated just like that, he would definitely lose something very important. Under the guidance of that strange enlightenment, he did not retreat, but led his companions to face the difficulty and began to activate the ready skill. That sword slash was completely executed under that strange perception. At that moment, he only felt that his essence, qi, and spirit had completely fused into one. His extraordinary mental strength, his own spiritual power, and all the light elemental energy that could be borrowed from the outside world had completely fused into that sword. Moreover, when he slashed with that sword that contained the truth of heaven and earth, Long Houchen even felt that he was one with heaven and earth, and the magic of the sunlight was in his grasp. It was precisely this sword that borrowed the power of heaven and earth that caused him to completely fall into a strange epiphany, and also began the process of awakening as the Son of Light. Countless strange scenes kept appearing in his mind, and waves of enlightenment lingered in his heart. When he woke up again, the profound meaning of the Son of Light was deeply imprinted in his mind, as if it had originally belonged to him. The Son of Light was the person favored by the Goddess of Light, and was the spokesperson of the sun. In any place where the sun shone, he could temporarily borrow the power of the sun and the Goddess of Light to make up for his shortcomings. This was the true legend of the Son of Light. Otherwise, if his cultivation was just a little faster than ordinary people, and his perception of the light elemental energy was a little stronger, then the constitution of the Son of Light would be too weak. The moment he truly awakened and became the Son of Light, his innate internal spiritual power also rose to the peak, the real 100, the real perfect. Long Houchen finally understood why the son of Samsara was able to heavily injure the demon god emperor even though his cultivation was less than a third of the demon god emperor's, and ultimately lead to the fall of the demon god emperor. This was because the son of Samsara must have also awakened at that time. If Long Houchen borrowed the power of light, then the son of Samsara borrowed the power of slaughter. He was the god's beloved of the god of war. Long Houchen awakened in this dreamy paradise filled with rich light elemental energy and an affinity with nature. If Kai the saint of Samsara, wanted to awaken, then it must be in a battlefield full of slaughter and blood. Only by constantly fighting, in a world full of slaughter, could she truly understand the profound meaning of the saint of Samsara. All of the golden light was finally completely retracted, and the two pairs of spirit wings on Long Houchen's back extended slightly. His body also hovered about half a foot off the ground before landing back down again, as if he was still not used to his four wings. Dense light elemental energy circulated in the air. Long Houchen's temperament seemed to have become more stable and mature, and he seemed to have grown a little taller. If one only looked at his appearance, no one would be able to tell that he was only 15 years old. He looked more like a young man in his 20s. After awakening, the Son of Light was not only astonishingly handsome, but also strangely attractive. Anyone who looked at him would unconsciously be attracted by the special affinity he had. "Hey, let's talk." Yi Xiaolei's voice sounded from the side. Long Houchen turned around, and the four wings on his back retracted into his body. The light elemental spirit Yiting also let out an excited cry and threw herself into Long Houchen's arms, directly disappearing into his chest. After awakening, Long Houchen was like the mother of light who nurtured her growth. Looking at the 8 spiritual stoves revolving around Yi Xiaolei, Long Houchen nodded. "Come with me." Yi Xiaolei waved at him and walked down the hill. Long Houchen gestured to his companions to wait, and immediately followed. Yi Xiaolei didn't walk too far. She seemed to have a lot on her mind. This kind of expression appearing on a 6 or 7-year-old girl was a little strange. Stopping in the middle of the hill, Yi Xiaolei turned around, and a layer of green light filled with the aura of life spread out, enveloping her and Long Houchen. "Little girl, what do you want to say to me?" Long Houchen asked with a smile. Even though Yi Xiaolei was only a 6 or 7-year-old girl, she couldn't help but be stunned when she saw his sunny smile. She couldn't help but say, "You're really good-looking. Even the elves aren't as good-looking as you." The corner of Long Houchen's eye twitched slightly. "Please use handsome to describe me. Good-looking is used to describe girls." Yi Xiaolei stuck out her tongue and said, "What does that matter? Aren't you still calling me little girl? According to you humans, I'm at least tens of thousands of years old. You're the one who's a little kid in front of me." Long Houchen looked at her speechlessly. He believed that this little girl was speaking the truth, but it was obviously unrealistic for him to treat her as an ancient senior who was tens of thousands of years old, because this girl's behavior wasn't much different from that of a little girl. Seeing his deflated look, Yi Xiaolei seemed to be very satisfied, and even the worry between her eyebrows dissipated a lot. But very quickly she became angry again and said angrily, "You're so annoying." Long Houchen smiled bitterly and said, "If I remember correctly, we seem to have helped you just now. How is it annoying?" Yi Xiaolei said matter-of-factly, "Of course it's annoying. You're the Son of Light. Why are you tainted with the aura of a necromancer, and a very powerful one at that? Are you crazy? Aren't you afraid that your heart of light will be broken?" Long Houchen looked at her very seriously and said, "If you have a way to help me remove the connection between me and him, I'll be very grateful." Yi Xiaolei was stunned for a moment and said, "Tell me the process of communicating with the necromancer, I'll listen." Immediately, Long Haochen told in detail how he entered the cave of dread howling and what happened in the Tower of Eternity. After listening to his words, Yi Xiaolei stared at him for a long time without saying a word. How is this possible? A necromancer of the light attribute. Heavens, don't tell me that guy, like you, is also a god's chosen of the goddess of light? That's incredible. A god's chosen of the goddess of light actually chose to be a necromancer. Something must have happened to him. Long Haochen was surprised, and said, "Only light mages with the constitution of the Son of Light can become light necromancers?" Yi Xiaolei nodded seriously, "Yes. Necromancers are a dirty profession, they have to deal with corpses and death. It's the biggest blasphemy to the light. Only the purest Son of Light constitution can never be touched by that filth, maintain the purity of the heart, and become a light necromancer. This is more difficult than inheriting the mantle of the goddess of light. That guy is simply the greatest genius of your human race." As for what a god's chosen is, Long Haochen already had some experience, so she didn't need to explain further. But he was still surprised. Could it be that the holy law of necromancy, sleeping calamity Electrolux, was also a god's chosen? A god's chosen from 10,000 years ago. Long Haochen and Yi Xiaolei looked at each other in a daze, their hearts full of shock. They both had the same question: what made sleeping calamity, who also had the constitution of the Son of Light, choose to become a necromancer? "I can't help you," Yi Xiaolei said with some difficulty. "This sleeping calamity Electrolux is too powerful. He could leave behind a mage tower that can tear space. It means that he has reached the level of a demigod. It's not something I can fight against. Even if my sister is still here, she can't break the relationship between you and him. If you want to know what happened to him, you can only climb to the top of the tower, and when you receive his true inheritance, you should be able to get some of his memories." She let out a soft sigh. Even if he's a necromancer of the light attribute, he's still a necromancer. Death and life oppose each other. As a life attribute, I can't leave this place with you. It's such a pity, after so many years of waiting, I finally met a god's chosen, but I can't leave. Don't you think it's very annoying? I've waited for 10,000 years. Long Haochen was speechless, and didn't know how to answer her. He could only look at her helplessly. Yi Xiaolei pouted and looked at him discontentedly for a long time, then said, "All right, I'll make a deal with you, how about it?" "What deal?" Long Haochen looked at her with some vigilance. Although this little girl was only 6 or 7 years old, she was probably the guardian of this fantasy paradise. Yi Xiaolei said impatiently, "Do you have to be so nervous? It won't do you any harm. There are only benefits. See?" She pointed to the 8 spiritual stoves beside her. Long Haochen nodded seriously. Yi Xiaolei said, "These spiritual stoves are for you, and I can also exempt you from the next round of tests when you leave heaven. You can directly accept the final test. In this way, as long as you guys aren't too greedy and get too many spiritual stoves, there won't be any problems. The benefits are great." Looking at her exaggerated expression and the way she spread her hands in a big circle, Long Haochen was unmoved and very seriously asked, "Then what do I need to do?" "Hey, can you do it? You don't have the drive of a man at all. Will it kill you to agree directly?" Yi Xiaolei said very discontentedly. Long Haochen shrugged his shoulders and said, "I'm not only responsible for myself, but also for my companions." Yi Xiaolei said, "It has nothing to do with them. It's just you. I want you to maintain a trace of spiritual connection with me. When I need your help, you can't refuse." "For example?" Long Haochen didn't relax and asked. Yi Xiaolei's eyes widened. "What else do you want?" Long Haochen said, "I want to know the worst possible outcome." Yi Xiaolei suddenly said with a face full of anger, "If the worst really happens, then you can only take advantage of it, you won't lose anything. No wonder you look like a woman, and your personality is also like a woman's. If you don't want to trade, then forget it. Long Houchen didn't get angry, turned around and walked in the direction of the mountain top. Yi Xiaolei was truly angered by him. She stomped her feet, but in the end she still followed. If the worst really happens, and you don't help me, you humans are finished. Long Houchen turned around again, looked at her with a smile, and made a gesture of waiting to hear more. About half an hour later, when Long Houchen and Yi Xiaolei returned together to the mountain top, their faces seemed to be very calm. It was as if nothing had happened. Long Houchen smiled at his companions, including Zhang Fangfang, who was in the middle of cultivating. Come, everyone, it's time to divide the spiritual stoves. The 8 spiritual stoves that were originally beside Yi Xiaolei were now hovering above Long Houchen's head. The 21st general-level monster hunters looked at each other, and the next moment, they suddenly rushed over in a cheer. Long Houchen turned to look at Yi Xiaolei and said, "Sorry to trouble you." Yi Xiaolei snorted unhappily, "Got it." As she said that, she pointed with her finger, and rays of green light fell on everyone. Everyone felt as if their bodies had fallen into a sticky liquid, and they were suddenly unable to move. Then, they saw spiritual stoves flying towards them one by one. Not everyone got a spiritual stove, and Long Houchen didn't get one. Kai Er got one, and among the others, Wang Yuan didn't get any spiritual stoves either. Instead, Han Yu, who didn't get any spiritual stoves before, got 2. The other 2 stayed on Zhang Fangfang's side. Yi Xiaolei waved her hand and said, "I've distributed them according to your attributes, so absorb them separately. Then, you can leave this place." Kai Er gave Long Houchen a puzzled look, as if asking why he didn't get any spiritual stoves. Long Houchen smiled at her and shook his head and said, "I've gotten enough this time." Yi Xiaolei snorted and said, "There's nothing suitable for him. Hurry up, don't waste time." The others started to absorb their spiritual stoves quickly, and Wang Yuan, who was free, subconsciously looked at Zhang Fangfang, who was cultivating in the distance. At this moment, Zhang Fangfang slowly opened his eyes, and his pupils emitted a faint golden glow. His gaze met hers, and Wang Yuan's expression froze slightly, and then she nodded at him. Long Houchen said, "Brother Zhang, hurry up and absorb them. These 2 spiritual stoves belong to you." Of course, there were some that were suitable for Long Houchen to absorb from these spiritual stoves. There were 5 light-type spiritual stoves, 1 for Sima Xian, 2 for Han Yu, and 2 for Zhang Fangfang. Long Houchen could absorb all of them. However, according to Yi Xiaolei, if he absorbed too many of these low-grade spiritual stoves, it would instead limit his future development. Moreover, with the awakening of his Son of Light's blessed constitution, Long Houchen also felt the gap between him and his companions. He also wanted to help his companions grow quickly. They were a team, and if the gap was too big, it would be very detrimental to their future development. Therefore, before returning, he told Yi Xiaolei that he had given up, and used her mouth to say that there were no spiritual stoves suitable for him. Because it was only the initial absorption, the absorption process was very simple. Very soon, everyone completed the initial integration with the spiritual stoves with a happy expression. When the last person completed the integration and opened his eyes, Yi Xiaolei said, "All right, you can all return to the temple. Remember, although I can erase the spiritual stoves test that you have to go through, and let you directly undergo the final integration with the spiritual stoves. However, the final test of illusory paradise is indispensable. That is, spiritual stoves synthesis. For those who have more than 2 spiritual stoves, you must use great perseverance to complete it. Once you fail, the best result is that all the spiritual stoves will disappear, and it may even threaten your life." Yes, this was also one of the biggest mysteries of illusory paradise. No matter how many spiritual stoves one obtained here, in the end, they could only be integrated into one. This was a crisis but also an opportunity. After the integration, the power of the spiritual stoves would be greatly increased, but once they failed, they would also have to pay a huge price. Those demons that were taken away by the demon emperor might be able to integrate with the spiritual stoves in their bodies through some special means, but they would also lose the opportunity to integrate. This secret was also the biggest reliance of the Temple of the Priests. Chapter 115. The reason why the Temple League dared to allow the demons to enter was because they were not afraid that they would obtain more spiritual stoves. The synthesis of more than 3 spiritual stoves would be extremely dangerous. The possibility of passing was quite small. Moreover, the dream paradise itself rejected the dark element. Unfortunately, the Temple League and the Temple of the Priests did not expect that the demon emperor would be able to intervene and rescue the powerful demons, causing the plan to fail. Moreover, the powerful demons also killed most of the demon hunters who entered the dream paradise. In terms of losses, both sides suffered a lot. However, it was obvious that the demons had a bigger loss. The few who died were the heirs of the demons' demon gods. Balls of green light moved automatically. They were the green light balls that floated behind everyone. Accompanied by the flashing green light, their bodies disappeared in the green light. Long Houchen was the last to disappear. Yi Xiaolei waved at him and said softly, "Thank you." How could she not know what was good for her? She just did not want to admit it. A strange feeling appeared on everyone's body. Everyone was in a separate green space. In this space there was only endless green, but also endless restrictions. They could not leave and could only sit there cross-legged. They completed the fusion of their respective spiritual stoves. Everyone absorbed different spiritual stoves, so the fusion process was naturally different as well. This process test was directly cancelled by Yi Xiaolei. Therefore, they skipped the test process and directly fused with the spiritual stove. Among them, the most relaxed was undoubtedly Long Houchen. He did not obtain any new spiritual stoves in the dream paradise. Therefore, after staying here for a while, a light flashed and he entered the next space. It was a green pool with rippling waves. He began the final spiritual stoves fusion test. The others did not have it so easy. In the process of fusing spiritual stoves, Wang Yuanyuan and Kai Er each fused a spiritual stove. Apart from them, the others had to fuse as many as 2 spiritual stoves. Although there was a sequence to the fusion, the continuous fusion of spiritual stoves was also a considerable test for their bodies. The speed at which Kai Er fused with the spiritual stove was very fast. As the possessor of the sacred maiden of Samsara's physique, and the other chosen one apart from Long Houchen, fusing with a spiritual stove that was compatible with her own attribute wasn't difficult at all for her, even though this was already the 3rd spiritual stove she had. The spiritual stove that Kai Er had fused with this time naturally couldn't be compared to her own spiritual stove of Samsara, but it was still a spiritual stove on the same level as the spiritual stove of Thousand Strike. The name of this spiritual stove was Shadow of Truth. It is only suitable for use by assassins. This was because only the assassin's shadow clone technique could bring out the full power of this spiritual stove. When the spiritual stove of True Shadow was used, it could make the assassin's illusory image become a real existence. The spiritual stove of True Shadow could make the illusory image exist for about 3 seconds. As the assassin evolved, this duration would increase. Its greatest use was that it could turn into a real phantom and possess the same combat power as the real body. Although it could only last for 3 seconds, there was no doubt that it would be useful in some crucial moments. With Kai Er's strength and the shadow of True Shadow, there was no doubt that her high attack power on the battlefield would be doubled. Imagine if she used the shadow of True Shadow at the same time as the spiritual stove of Samsara, how terrifying would it be? Of course, this spiritual stove could not be used casually. It could only be used 3 times a day at most. Unfortunately, this spiritual stove would have to fuse with the other 2 spiritual stoves of Kai Er soon after the fusion. Whether or not the fusion would be successful would be the biggest problem that Kai faced. She was also the only one among the 8 people to complete the fusion of 3 spiritual stoves. The shadow of True Shadow was quickly absorbed, and the next moment, Kai appeared in the same blue pool as Long Houchen and soaked in it. A strange halo spread out from her body. Wang Yuanyuan's fusion speed was only a bit slower than Kai-er's. She only needed to fuse with 1 spiritual stove, and the spiritual stove of the spatial gate was also compatible with her attribute. After the fusion was completed, she even directly passed through the green pond, and was the first to appear in the Divine Nature Palace. She, who only had 1 spiritual stove, did not need to go through the fusion process. Therefore, she became the first person to benefit from entering the dream paradise alive. Of course, at this time, she would not walk out of the dream temple. She still had to wait for her companions to come out, especially Long Houchen. It was not convenient for them to leave directly, so they had to leave through the Tower of Eternity. The process of Sima Xian fusing with the spiritual stove could only be described as fiery. The purple lightning almost roasted him, and all the hair on his body, except for his hair, stood up from the electricity. There was no doubt about the attack power of the Purple Thunder spiritual stove. This spiritual stove could be ranked as a second-grade spiritual stove. Its power could be imagined. Moreover, Sima Xian was not of the thunder element, and there were almost no humans of the thunder element in this world. Therefore, it became more and more difficult for him to fuse. Just the fusion of the Purple Thunder spiritual stove brought him so much pain that he wanted to die. However, Sima Xian's tenacity was no less than that of anyone in the team. If it was not for his inner perseverance and tenacity, as a priest, how could he carry on with violence to the end? This guy shouted out loud while doing his best to fuse with the Purple Thunder spiritual stove. Perhaps it was his valiance that conquered the heart of the Purple Thunder spiritual stove. Finally, the fusion process gradually began. As for his other spiritual stove, it was much easier to fuse with it. The other spiritual stove was called Light's Shadow. It was carefully chosen by Long Houchen after consulting with Yi Xiaolei. This was a support spiritual stove, and it only had 1 function, which was to repeat any attack after use. It also had a limit of 3 uses per day. Light's Shadow and the Purple Thunder spiritual stove were naturally for the high explosive power that Sima Xian sought. His explosive power was positive, and it was what the team needed. Compared to Sima Xian, Lin Xian was much more fortunate. His 2 spiritual stoves were shockingly compatible with him. He did not need to do anything, and the 2 spiritual stoves actually began to fuse with his body at the same time. Moreover, Lin Xian's control over the fire element far exceeded that of ordinary people. The fusion was like a fish in water. Compared to Wang Yuanyuan, he was only an hour slower. He completed the fusion process of the 2 spiritual stoves and entered the green pool of water formed by the spiritual stove. Among his 2 spiritual stoves, besides the Heart's Flame spiritual stove, the other was the Eagle Flame spiritual stove. It was a strange spiritual stove that could attack and defend. The Eagle Flame spiritual stove could release a giant flame hawk to help him attack and defend. Moreover, it was completely under his control. The Eagle Flame spiritual stove and the Heart's Flame spiritual stove seemed to have a very high compatibility. This was also an important reason why he could absorb 2 spiritual stoves at the same time. Han Yu's fusion was also very smooth. His 2 spiritual stoves were the Light Guardian spiritual stove and the Light Aggregator spiritual stove. One was mainly for defense, and the other was mainly for supporting cultivation. They were both relatively peaceful spiritual stoves. Moreover, the 2 spiritual stoves he fused with could directly increase his spiritual stove's cultivation. Therefore, during the fusion process, Han Yu's strength gradually increased. His innate internal spiritual power was also as high as 80. He could faintly feel that in the future fusion of spiritual stoves, he might be the smoothest one. Chen-Ing-Er's fusion was relatively more difficult. In addition to the substitute spiritual stove, she obtained another spiritual stove called the time spiritual stove. It was a spiritual stove that was very suitable for summoners. With this spiritual stove, she could extend the ability and time of summon beasts. To put it simply, if it was used on Madul, then after Madul absorbed the magic crystal, his strength would not last 10 minutes, but 20 minutes. It was a very practical skill. Coupled with the substitute spiritual stove, which was almost double summoning, Chen-Ing-Er's strength would definitely be greatly enhanced. However, it was not easy to absorb these two spiritual stoves. Their attributes were not very compatible, so it was naturally difficult to absorb them. However, Chen-Ing-Er's personality was actually the opposite of Wang Yuanyuan's. Wang Yuanyuan looked tough on the surface, but she was actually very sensitive on the inside. On the other hand, Chen-Ing-Er was soft on the outside but hard on the inside. After obtaining Madul Piglet, her role in the team had obviously increased. However, she could only be used as a support or attack at critical moments. Chen-Ing-Er had always been very concerned about her performance in the team. She had always felt that she did not fulfill her duty as a summoner. The better her teammates treated her, the deeper she blamed herself. At this moment, the fusion of these two spiritual stoves brought her great pain. However, she gritted her teeth and did not have the slightest intention of backing down. The determination in her eyes made it impossible for her to compromise. Relying on her firm willpower, she continued to complete the fusion process with the spiritual stove. Everyone's encounters were different, but they were all working hard together. In life, there would always be some opportunities. Almost everyone would have them. However, whether or not they could seize the opportunity depended on their own abilities. Without a doubt, now was the best time for the 21st General-level monster hunters to seize the opportunity. As long as they could successfully complete their journey to Dream Paradise, they would definitely stand out from their peers among the monster hunters. Spiritual stove synthesis was something that Long Haochen and the others had never experienced before. They had rarely even heard of it. Even when Long Xingwu explained the profound meaning of the spiritual stove to Long Haochen, he only briefly mentioned the spiritual stove synthesis. In theory, there was no limit to the number of spiritual stoves that a person could absorb. As long as the body could withstand it, it could continue to absorb. But in reality? Generally speaking, if a powerhouse could absorb 3 spiritual stoves, it was basically his limit. And that was if he was lucky enough to obtain 3 spiritual stoves. If one wanted to continue to fuse spiritual stoves, it was very likely that the spiritual stoves would conflict in the body. Only those who had a deep understanding of spiritual stoves and could perfectly match the various attributes of their spiritual stoves could fuse 4 or even 5 spiritual stoves. In the history of the Temple League, there were a few powerhouses who fused a lot of spiritual stoves. In the end, they all left a deep mark in history. However, most of the records were about the side effects of absorbing too many spiritual stoves. If one really wanted to fuse more spiritual stoves, there was another way, and that was spiritual stove synthesis. By synthesizing the spiritual stoves that one already had, one would reduce the number and attributes of the spiritual stoves in the body, and make more space to absorb other spiritual stoves. After the synthesis, the effect of the spiritual stoves would be superimposed by the synthesized spiritual stoves, and there would definitely be an increase in strength. This was great news for anyone, but was spiritual stove synthesis really that easy? Just obtaining a chance to synthesize a spiritual stove was extremely difficult. Moreover, spiritual stove synthesis itself had great uncertainty and risk. This time, Long Haochen and the others obtained such an opportunity. However, whether or not this opportunity could be turned into a harvest, no one could say. As his body immersed in the green jade-colored pool, Long Haochen's heart immediately calmed down. After the awakening of the god's chosen physique, his heart became even more ethereal, and entering into a meditative state was extremely easy. Immediately after, he felt his body quietly being wrapped by that dense life force, gently infiltrating it. The process of this life force entering his body was extremely slow, at least it felt like that. This beneficial and harmless life force combined with Long Houchen's liquid internal spiritual power, warming his body and mind. It was a kind of complete relaxation. All the muscles, meridians, and body and mind of his body were completely relaxed at this moment. Gradually, this gentle life force spread throughout his body, and then slowly rushed towards his chest. The chest was also the endpoint of this life force's circulation. The light elemental fairy, Yiting, sat cross-legged within the saint's spiritual stove. This light green life force was directly injected into the saint's spiritual stove. Immediately after, a kind of mystical change began to appear. Yiting's hands began to make some strange movements, and her charming face revealed a happy expression. Because of this, she also entered a kind of special state. A gentle white light was emitted from the saint's spiritual stove, gradually turning into a white halo that spread outwards. Long Houchen suddenly felt his head become dizzy, and his chest felt warm and cozy. However, this did not affect his meditative state. The liquid spiritual power within his body quietly dissipated in this warm and cozy feeling. The rate of consumption was extremely astonishing. In this green pool, his life force continued to increase, but it did not receive any internal spiritual power to replenish it. Time seemed to not exist here. Long Houchen only felt that the warmth in his chest gradually became scorching hot, and then gradually became blazing hot. It was as if there was a ball of fire fiercely burning in his chest. However, at this time, he was not worried. If he was unable to complete this spiritual stove synthesis process with his own body and the two spiritual stoves, then who else could? This was not arrogance, but self-confidence. However, Long Houchen's heart was still nervous, not for himself, but for his companions. The pain brought by this spiritual stove synthesis was much greater than he had imagined. Moreover, after his internal spiritual power was completely exhausted during the spiritual stove synthesis process, without the internal spiritual power to protect his body, all the pain had to be borne by his body. This was not only a test of his body's endurance to pain, but also a test of his willpower. In his heart, Long Houchen was also looking forward to what kind of change would occur after Yiting and the saint's spiritual stove fused. He only hoped that the saint's spiritual stove's guiding effect would not disappear. In fact, Long Houchen had overlooked one thing. This was also the reason why his mental state had not completely recovered after completing the awakening of the God's chosen one. The pain he had to bear was indeed getting stronger and stronger, to the point where he had to grit his teeth and concentrate his mind to barely endure it. However, one mustn't forget that even though he only had two spiritual stoves, both of them had evolved before. An evolved spiritual stove and one that had not evolved, that was not the same concept. To put it simply, before the saint's spiritual stove evolved, it was only a fifth-rank spiritual stove, but after one evolution, it could be said to be a fourth-rank spiritual stove. After two evolutions, it was a peak fourth-rank spiritual stove. Moreover, these evolved spiritual stoves were more stable and more deeply rooted, making the synthesis process much more difficult. Moreover, he still had the light elemental spirit Yiting. After following Long Houchen, Yiting had already evolved 3 times. Not to mention him, even many experts of the 8th and 9th rank might not be able to evolve their spiritual stoves that many times. After 3 evolutions, Yiting possessed a nearly substantial body. Moreover, in the illusory paradise, she truly possessed her own life force. From a certain point of view, she was no longer a simple spiritual stove. Her intelligence had already been developed. As long as she continued to evolve, one day she would evolve into the kind of intelligent spiritual stove that Long Houchen had mentioned, the highest level of spiritual stove. Therefore, when Long Houchen's Saint's spiritual stove fused with the light elemental spirit Yiting, the consumption and side effects were naturally much more severe than when other people fused with spiritual stoves. Of course, the pain Long Houchen endured was not the most intense. At least, Kai Er's pain was much more intense than his. Similarly, sitting in the azure green pond, Kai Er's charming face was pale, sweat unceasingly rolling down her face, and her body was rippling with a layer of thick gray air. The surging killing intent was somewhat incompatible with the surrounding elemental fluctuations brimming with life force. Moreover, the clothes on her body had unexpectedly completely disappeared under the effect of that terrifying killing intent. Sweat unceasingly rolled down her spotlessly white skin. One could faintly see that on the palms of her hands that were closed over her chest, in other words, right in the middle of her chest, a black and gray radiance unceasingly flickered. A swift and fierce killing intent also unceasingly rose. Although Long Houchen's 2 spiritual stoves had evolved many times, in the end it was only 2. On the other hand, Kai Er had 3 spiritual stoves, and one had just been fused. The difference between the fusion of 3 spiritual stoves and 2 spiritual stoves was several times greater. Therefore, even if Long Houchen's 2 spiritual stoves had already completed 5 evolutions, it was still far from comparable to the pain Kai Er was currently enduring. Everyone's experience during the spiritual stove fusion was completely different. Even if 2 people had similar cultivations and spiritual stoves, it would still be the same. This was because during the fusion process, everyone's mentality would affect the result of the fusion. Kai Er's willpower was undoubtedly unwavering. Especially after following Long Houchen, the haze in her heart was gradually illuminated by the light brought by Long Houchen. It could be said that it had sufficiently perfected her character. In the face of difficulties, she was indomitable. Even if it was for Long Houchen, she would definitely persevere and would not relax at all. Her 3 spiritual stoves were the spiritual stove of samsara, the spiritual stove of thousand strike, and the spiritual stove of true shadow that had just been fused. Without a doubt, the spiritual stove of samsara was the absolute leader among the 3 spiritual stoves. When the 3 spiritual stoves started to fuse under the effect of the strange life energy, the terrifying power of the spiritual stove of samsara instantly erupted. The other 2 spiritual stoves were directly crushed by the powerful power of the spiritual stove of samsara. Then, the process of the 3 spiritual stoves fusing began. More accurately, it was the process of the spiritual stove of samsara absorbing the other 2 spiritual stoves' fragments and energy. The spiritual stove of samsara was really too domineering. How would it feel when 2 spiritual stoves were suddenly crushed in one's body? At that moment, not only did Kai Er's clothes turn into ashes, even her entire body was almost unable to bear it. Fortunately, she had fused with the spiritual stove of samsara for a long time and could truly use the power of the spiritual stove of samsara. After fusing for more than 10 years, the spiritual stove of samsara was very close to her body. Thus, when her body was about to collapse, the spiritual stove of samsara split a part of its energy to protect her. However, even so, the spiritual stove of samsara only protected her body. It did not reduce the pain. If a person's body was torn apart, what kind of pain would that be? Thus, in that instant, Kai Er felt that she had become numb. Then, the unparalleled pain caused her entire body to sink into a process that was even more terrifying than when she had fused with the spiritual stove of samsara. If it had been Long Houchen, he would probably have screamed in pain. However, Kai Er would not have. But Kai Er wouldn't. She was a girl who had been tormented by the spiritual stove of samsara for more than 10 years. Her mental fortitude was so strong that she could still grit her teeth and endure such pain. The fusion of 3 spiritual stoves was too difficult. Even with the spiritual stove of samsara as the lead, she was still in danger. The others were also fusing their own brand new spiritual stove. Of course, their fusion was not as difficult as Long Houchen's and Kai Er's. However, it was their first time owning a spiritual stove. Their compatibility with their new spiritual stoves was very limited. Therefore, the process of fusing the spiritual stove was definitely not smooth sailing. To the 21st General Level Monster Hunters, this test could be described as extremely difficult. Their own abilities, willpower, and perseverance were directly tested. If they failed, they would not only lose their spiritual stoves, they would also lose the right to continue staying in the team. Everyone was very clear about this. Therefore, they would never give up. Wang Yuanyuan waited quietly in the Divine Nature Palace. She was surrounded by a strange green scene. A thick life force nourished her body. She could even feel her external spiritual power strengthening subtly. However, she was obviously not in the mood to experience the benefits of the external spiritual power strengthening. To her, it was more important that her companions returned safely. She, who did not experience the third round of test, could only wait. She did not try to leave because she did not want to cause trouble for her companions. Soon, 6 hours had passed. The dreamy paradise would only last for 3 days. After waiting for 6 hours, Wang Yuanyuan had no choice but to enter the state of cultivation. Otherwise, she was afraid that she would not be able to control herself and rush out. Loneliness was often more torturous than physical pain. Finally, a golden light flashed. A figure appeared from the green and landed directly beside Wang Yuanyuan. Ah! As soon as this person appeared, he could not help but scream. His body was still convulsing violently. He held his heart with both hands and sat on the ground. "What's wrong?" Wang Yuanyuan hurried forward and asked with concern. The first person to come out was not anyone else. It was Zhang Fangfang, who had already broken through to the 7th level. Zhang Fangfang panted heavily. There were beads of sweat rolling down his forehead. It was not easy for him to relax. He looked at Wang Yuanyuan and smiled. "I'm fine. I'm fine." Wang Yuanyuan said unhappily, "You always say you're fine? Last time you said you were fine too. You almost became a cripple." Zhang Fangfang laughed and scratched his head. "I'm really fine. However, the spiritual stove synthesis is too torturous. If it wasn't for the fact that my cultivation had broken through to the 7th order and the amount of spiritual power I poured into the fusion, I might not have been able to handle this fusion. Speaking of which, that Yi Xiaolei was merciful. My spiritual power has already exceeded 10,000. It seems that she can really change the rules of the dreamy paradise to a certain extent." Wang Yuanyuan said with surprise, "You succeeded? What did the spiritual stove become?" Zhang Fangfang stood up and said with a smile, "I succeeded. I call this spiritual stove after the synthesis the second life spiritual stove." As he said that, his eyes flashed. Following that, a golden light shot out from his chest. Suddenly, another Zhang Fangfang appeared in front of Wang Yuanyuan. However, this Zhang Fangfang did not have any equipment on him. Moreover, it was a golden existence. This one has 80% of my spiritual power. It can even use the weapons I give it and follow my orders. It can summon once a day, and each summon can last for 2 hours. After the spiritual stove synthesis, it can be said that its power has increased greatly. Wang Yuanyuan looked at the golden figure in surprise. Her heart was filled with envy. This doppelganger was enough to reach the level of a second-level spiritual stove. This increase was real, and it could last for a long time. More importantly, it could even use equipment. Although she did not know what level the spiritual stove Zhang Fangfang had obtained before, the birth of a second-level spiritual stove must mean that Zhang Fangfang's strength had increased greatly. With this spiritual stove, he, who had just entered the 7th rank, was even qualified to challenge for the Mithril Foundation armor. Seeing that Zhang Fangfang was fine, Wang Yuanyuan subconsciously retreated to the side. She was about to sit back and continue to wait for her companions to return. Zhang Fangfang suddenly said, "Yuanyuan, Do you have a boyfriend? Wang Yuanyuan looked up at him in surprise. When she saw Zhang Fangfang's burning gaze, she didn't know why she, who had always been full of masculinity, felt a little flustered. She subconsciously said, "No." "That's good." Zhang Fangfang was obviously relieved. Wang Yuanyuan frowned. "What do you mean that's good? Can't I have someone who likes me?" Zhang Fangfang was a little flustered. No, don't misunderstand. I didn't mean it that way. I like you." When he blurted out the last 5 words, the two of them were stunned at the same time. Wang Yuanyuan felt her heart twitch, but she quickly recovered and said with a sullen face, "But I don't like you. Do you think that I should repay you with my body just because you saved me? Let me tell you, I don't like men. You saved me, so I'll return it to you in the future." After saying this, she immediately turned her head, not looking at Zhang Fangfang. However, she found that her heart was beating very fast, and after saying those words, a kind of regret that she had never felt before instantly spread. Zhang Fangfang did not say anything. He only quietly looked at Wang Yuanyuan. Wang Yuanyuan did not turn her head. The atmosphere suddenly became a little tense. After a long time, Zhang Fangfang seemed to have adjusted his emotions. His voice was a little hoarse and low. "Yuan, I never thought that you would like me. After all, we have only known each other for such a short time. Whether you like me or not, whether you like men or women, none of these will affect my liking for you. I just want you to know this. That's enough." Wang Yuanyuan's shoulders trembled. She did not turn her head as she said, "What do you like about me?" Her voice clearly softened. At that moment, it was as if in front of her eyes, the man who was crippled with both hands but still smiled and told her that everything was fine. Zhang Fangfang said, "Do you believe in love at first sight? To answer your question honestly, I can only say that I don't know. But I am very lucky that fate has allowed me to meet you." Wang Yuanyuan fell silent again. Zhang Fangfang did not say anything else. His expression relaxed a little. He did not move closer to her. He just sat cross-legged on the ground and stared blankly at the slightly slender but extremely tall girl in front of him. At that moment, suddenly, there was a flash of golden light. Another figure fell out from the green light. His sorry state was even worse than Zhang Fangfang's. He fell to the ground with his mouth full of mud. Wang Yuanyuan was shocked. She quickly stood up and saw that the person on the ground was Han Yu. Han Yu was not just gasping for breath. He had fallen into a coma. Before Wang Yuanyuan could go forward, a golden light fell accurately on Han Yu's body. Great recovery spell. A single target light healing spell. Zhang Fangfang's steady hand pressed on Han Yu's chest, feeling the changes in his body. After a moment, Zhang Fangfang breathed a sigh of relief and said, "He is very good. If I am not wrong, his synthesis should be successful." In his chest, there was an extremely gentle yet extremely tenacious light, a tribute spiritual power. It must be the power of the spiritual stove. Wang Yuanyuan nodded. Looking at Zhang Fangfang's serious face, she said, "That's good." Their eyes met. It was Wang Yuanyuan who fled. She immediately turned her face away, and did not dare to look at Zhang Fangfang again. She was a little afraid of the seriousness in his eyes. About an hour later, Han Yu gradually woke up. Just as Zhang Fangfang said, he succeeded. After the two spiritual stoves combined, they became a brand new spiritual stove, Light's Blessing. This spiritual stove was very powerful. Under any circumstances, it could allow Han Yu to release a light elemental shield with a diameter of 5 meters. The defensive power of this shield was equivalent to 3 times his own spiritual power, which was equivalent to the defensive strength of his divine block. At the same time, in the process of using Light's Blessing, other people's spiritual power would recover at 10 times the speed of the dark attribute, until they were completely restored to their peak. There was no doubt that this spiritual stove would become stronger as his strength increased. The only regret was that after the synthesis, Light's blessing seemed to be unable to evolve. Overall, his spiritual stove was still slightly inferior to Zhang Fangfang's second spiritual stove. Lin Xian was the next to appear. He had just come out of the green mist, and the next moment, he burst into tears. "Hey, brother Yuyao, what's wrong?" "It's fine if the synthesis failed, as long as you're fine." Wang Yuanyuan comforted him. Han Yu smiled bitterly. "This synthesis is too difficult. Even with his control of the fire element, he still failed." "Who said I failed? I'm just worried about my hair." At this point, Lin Xian couldn't help but continue to cry. Indeed, this guy's appearance was a little sad. His magic robe was burnt to a crisp, and his head was charred black. His originally elegant dark green hair was gone, and even his eyebrows were charred. However, looking at him, he seemed to be calmer than Han Yu and Zhang Fangfang. At least, there were no signs of him collapsing. Wang Yuanyuan said unhappily, "Let him cry. It's good if he cries to death. What's there to feel sad about? This is also good. You can be bald like Sima and you can look more manly. Maybe Sister Xian will like you more." "Really?" Lin Xian stopped crying and raised his head with tears in his eyes. Wang Yuanyuan said unhappily, "It's fake." Zhang Fangfang smiled and said, "No matter what, at least we have succeeded at the moment. I hope they can succeed too." After a full hour, Chen Ying'er and Sima Xian appeared at almost the same time. However, the two of them looked completely different. Chen Ying'er's hair was disheveled. As soon as she appeared, she fainted in Wang Yuanyuan's arms. Her clothes were completely soaked in sweat, and she looked very weak. Sima Xian looked even more miserable than her. When he appeared, he looked like a large piece of barbecued meat that had fallen to the ground. There was a faint smell of burnt meat and burnt meat. Many parts of his skin were carbonized and some of his flesh was really burnt. Han Yu and Zhang Fangfang did their best to treat them, and Sima Xian's life was saved. However, the two of them were still unconscious, and it seemed like they wouldn't wake up anytime soon. Especially Sima Xian, whose injuries were very serious. After eating Lin Xian's elixir and treatment, his life was barely saved. It was hard to say if there would be any side effects. A ray of golden light cut through the green mist, and a golden figure emerged from it. The light elements Sima Xian, Han Yu, and Zhang Fangfang had all come out. The only light elements that appeared was Long Haochen. However, in the next moment, everyone's eyes turned blank. This was because the first thing that walked out of the green mist was a slender, smooth, fair, and tender leg. Chapter 116. The light element. It was indeed the light element. However, only Long Haochen was left in the light element. Could it be that he had a sex change? Seeing those slender thighs, everyone's eyes went blank. Their pupils dilated and their mouths gaped open, looking as if they were about to cry out in surprise. Fortunately, the slender thighs were not completely exposed. When they reached more than 20 centimeters above the knee, the light golden battle skirt covered the upper part of the thighs in time. However, even so, it was still very strong enough to cause people to have wild and fanciful thoughts. Under the dazed gazes of the crowd, a slender, seductive beauty had already walked out of the green mist. Her slender figure was more than 1.7 meters tall, about the same height as Wang Yuanyuan. Her radiant beauty gave people a strange feeling of sacredness that could not be profaned. A golden battle skirt covered the most important parts of her delicate body, but it also revealed her arms and long legs. On her chest, there was a milky white diamond-shaped gem. In the middle of her forehead, there was a golden diamond-shaped gem. Her ethereal and elegant face carried a faint smile. In her right hand, she held a golden staff that was 2 meters long. The golden gem at the top of the staff emitted a gentle light. Her beauty was the kind of divine and flawless beauty. Her fair feet did not directly step on the ground, but instead floated about half a foot above the ground, showing off her slender and tall figure. Feeling the stunned gazes of the crowd, the young girl smiled. You don't recognize me? You are. Lin Xian said in shock. The staff in the young girl's right hand shone with a golden light. Her upper body leaned forward slightly, and suddenly 3 pairs of light wings suddenly unfolded from her back, like petals that had suddenly bloomed. Each of the wings of light was transparent like a dragonfly's, but much larger. In the instant they unfolded, a halo of light like the sun appeared under the young girl's feet. A gentle golden mist of light surrounded her body and quietly rose. Yiting! Everyone exclaimed at the same time, staring blankly at the Yiting in front of them. This was the light elemental spirit that they had taken back from the demons under Long Haochen's command? Is this real? It was no wonder that they were so shocked. At this moment, Yiting looked no different from a human. If she landed on the ground and retracted her wings of light, she would simply be a character girl. She didn't look like a body of energy at all. She looked like a real person. Wang Yuan couldn't help but lean over and pinch Yiting's arm. It was soft, warm, and smooth. It felt really good. Why you've become a human? More accurately, I've become an elf. Moreover, it should be an elf that has mutated. Long Haochen's voice sounded. In the next moment, he had already walked out of the green mist. Compared to the people who had come out before, he was almost the same as before, and he didn't look tired at all. However, the way he looked at Yiting was a little strange. The current Yiting could be said to be the result of the spiritual stove synthesis. It could also be said to be the result of various fortuitous encounters. The illusory paradise was undoubtedly the most suitable place for an elemental elf to live. By chance, Yiting had absorbed a large amount of life force and light elements, thoroughly healing her injuries and truly possessing a life force. She naturally wouldn't become a human. In a sense, she was still a body of energy. However, the energy was too concentrated, producing an effect similar to a real entity. Just as Long Haochen said, she was now a real elf, not an elemental elf. Compared to Yiting, the saint's spiritual stove was clearly a lot weaker. Its breeding ability was similarly absorbed by Yiting. Even Long Haochen's destroyed blue rain and hibiscus of light were now integrated into Yiting's body. Even if it could be restored later, if Long Haochen wanted to use it, it would have to be Yiting who gave it to him. The thing that Long Haochen was most worried about still happened. The saint's spiritual stove's guiding ability was stripped away along with the spiritual stove synthesis, becoming a part of Yiting's ability. Generally speaking, it was this synthesis process that truly made Yiting. Of course, Yiting was still Long Haochen's spiritual stove. The contract didn't change, but there was a direct spiritual connection. What was different from before was that the current Yiting was already an individual. She had thoughts, wisdom, and could act as a true light mage. She could do whatever light mages of the same rank could do, or even better. As for the improvement of her strength, it would have to depend on Long Haochen. For Yiting, the current transformation was really too satisfying. So much so that she looked at Long Haochen with a peculiar gaze. This was also the most headache-inducing part for Long Haochen. He didn't want to make Kair unhappy because of Yiting's transformation. He could treat Yiting as a friend, but there wouldn't be any other changes. Too beautiful. If I didn't already have Xian, I would have fallen in love with you. Lin Xian said shamelessly. Coupled with his current embarrassed appearance, it immediately caused people to be unable to restrain their laughter. Long Haochen said to Yiting, "Change back to your original size." Yiting pouted her small mouth and said, "But master, that will weaken my strength." Long Haochen smiled bitterly. "Then it's better for you to change back to your original size. If you really encounter a situation where you need to use your full strength, you can change back to your original size." Yiting's evolution even gave her the ability to directly communicate with humans. "All right." Yiting seemed to be a little dissatisfied as she nodded. Under the regretful gazes of her fellow male compatriots, the halo of light disappeared. Soon, she returned to her original size and shrunk very thoroughly. She directly turned into a mere foot tall and floated to sit on Long Houchen's shoulder. Although she had already become small, sitting on Long Houchen's shoulder still made him feel a little uncomfortable. However, because of his own selfishness, he had just ordered Yiting to do something that she didn't want to do, so he couldn't ask for anything else. Turning around, looking at the dark green mist, Long Houchen's eyes became nervous. He murmured, "Only Kai-Er is left." Yes, up until now, everyone except for Kai-Er had already come out. Because of their serious injuries, Sima Xian and Chen Ying'er's situation couldn't be checked for the time being. There was also the possibility that the spiritual stove fusion would fail. Yiting did not idle around. Sitting on Long Houchen's shoulder, she released healing magic one after another, landing on Sima Xian and Chen Ying'er's bodies. In terms of healing ability, she was much more reliable than Han Yu and Zhang Fangfang. Being able to cast magic on others meant that the 21st general-level monster hunters would no longer lack priests in the future. Time passed minute by minute, second by second, and Long Houchen's expression became more and more anxious. His fists unconsciously clenched, and he constantly prayed in his heart, "Kai-Er, you can't have an accident, you must succeed." Right now, he was already beginning to regret giving Kai-Er another spiritual furnace. If it was just the spiritual stove of Samsara and the spiritual stove of Thousand Strike, perhaps it would be easier for her. Just as Long Houchen was feeling extremely anxious, a sweet voice suddenly rang out in his mind. "Big idiot, you're anxious, aren't you? Serves you right. I'll bring you to her. She's already powerless to come out. I need you to bring her out." This was Yi Xiaolei's voice. Long Houchen was delighted and quickly nodded. The green light shone and wrapped around his body again. In the next moment, Long Houchen had already disappeared in the green light. And Yiting was actually repelled by the green light, not allowing her and Long Houchen to enter together. When his vision became clear again, he found himself back in the green pool where he was fusing with the spiritual stove. The water in the pool was not actually water, but pure life energy. No matter when he soaked in it, he would feel very comfortable. According to Yi Xiaolei, this was obviously not where he was before, but the place where Kai-Er was doing the spiritual stove fusion. But where was Kai-Er? Although Long Houchen was a little flustered, he was still calm and did not blindly search for her. He slowly closed his eyes and used his powerful spiritual power to spread his perception, searching for traces of Kai-Er. This green space seemed to have no end, but Long Houchen's spiritual power quickly sensed its actual boundary. Then, a weak life aura appeared in his perception. Without any hesitation, he opened his eyes and quickly arrived at the place where the life aura was. It was Kai-Er. When he approached, Long Houchen immediately saw Kai-Er. At that moment, her body was completely soaked in the green liquid, and only her face was still floating on the surface of the water. Her pretty face was frighteningly pale, and if it was not for the weak life aura, it would even look like a corpse floating there. "Kai-Er!" Long Houchen cried out in distress, and hurriedly rushed over to pull her into his arms. This hug was not a big deal, but he was immediately stunned. What entered his hand was smooth and soft skin. Even though it was in the green liquid, he could still clearly feel the smooth and soft touch. The curves were exquisite and the curves were in all the right places. When Long Houchen touched it, he felt as if he had been electrocuted. Although he and Kai-Er had been together for a long time, the two of them were still young and ignorant about the matters between men and women. Moreover, Long Houchen was afraid of hurting her, so he had always been very polite. At most, he kissed and hugged her. However, he had never really touched her skin. At that moment, even though he did not carry Kai-Er out of the water, he could feel that she was naked. This was the first time that they openly met each other. However, Long Houchen's sluggishness only lasted for a very short moment. Although there was a strong feeling of strangeness and embarrassment in his heart, Kai-Er's safety was the most important in his heart. He fiercely bit the tip of his tongue, and under the sting of the tongue, he became a little more clear-headed. He slowly poured his gentle light spiritual power into Kaire's body. He poured his spiritual power very slowly, for fear of hurting Kaire's body. When the spiritual power entered Kaire's body, he could also feel some of the state of Kaire's body through the connection of spiritual power. Kaire's body was in a very bad state. There were many shocking damage to her meridians, and a few of the main meridians were directly broken. She was barely able to maintain the state of connection with a strange light green life force. It was not an exaggeration to say that Kaire's life was hanging by a thread. If it was not for the fact that she was soaking in this green pond, she would probably die in a short period of time. The more he felt that Kaire was in danger, the more Long Houchen's heart trembled, but he also became more careful with the spiritual power he poured out. A gentle holy light barrier bloomed, enveloping him and Kaire's body. It was not that Long Houchen did not know how to use more powerful healing magic, but because Kaire's state was too weak, he did not dare to use magic that consumed a lot of spiritual power to heal her. He only dared to carefully repair her body bit by bit. This definitely could not be rushed, otherwise, it was very likely that it would have the opposite effect. After an unknown amount of time, he finally managed to gradually repair the damaged meridians in Kaire's body. Although it couldn't be said to be completely cured, at least he was able to ensure that each and every meridian was connected. He secretly thanked Yi Xiaolei in his heart. Although the meridians in Kaire's body were seriously damaged, under the care of Illusory Paradise, the broken meridians had been forcefully connected by the gentle life force. Not only did it protect Kaire's life, but it also made it much easier for him to treat her. The holy light barrier that nourished Kaire's body never stopped. As her meridians were unblocked, Kaire's spiritual power also gradually began to recover. Strands of spiritual power gradually circulated in her body, and her meridians could also automatically absorb the surrounding life force and the healing effects of Long Houchen's light magic. Kaire's recovery was speeding up. After a long while, accompanied by a soft groan, Kaire's delicate body trembled slightly, and she slowly opened her eyes. However, Long Houchen was stunned once again. This was because when Kaire's body trembled, he couldn't help but tremble when his hand touched her silky smooth skin. In a moment of carelessness, his right hand actually slid down from her slender waist and supported a round, plump, and perky, perfectly round breast. His fingers and palms sank slightly. Even if he was ignorant in this area, he knew what he was touching. At this moment, Kaire's beautiful eyes opened, and at the same time, she felt the heat of his large hand. Their eyes met, and both of them were stunned. "You!" Kaire's voice trembled slightly. A layer of rosy red dyed her beautiful face, followed along her face and slender neck, all the way to the bottom of the water. I. Long Houchen did not know how to explain. He did not know whether to move his hand away or not. However, that astonishing softness made him unable to stop even if he wanted to. Kaire bit her red lips, turned her head, and hugged Long Houchen's waist with both hands, so that her body was closer to him, but she did not dare to look at him. She could feel her heart beating faster, and her heart was filled with panic. However, other than panic and shyness, she felt more satisfaction in her heart. Kaire's experience had filled her with darkness and loneliness. However, ever since she met Long Houchen, her heart had been constantly changing. Whenever she encountered danger or hardship, her fool would always be able to come to her side at the first instant. In Long Houchen's eyes, this was how it should be, but in Kaire's heart, this was her greatest happiness. After experiencing the inhumane pain of the spiritual stove synthesis, the first thing she saw when she woke up from her coma was him. The intimate contact made her heart filled with shyness, but after the pain, the first thing she saw was the man she loved. What could be more satisfying than this? Therefore, she did not blame Long Houchen in her heart at all, and she also completely believed that Long Houchen was not the kind of person who would take advantage of others. The gentle light elements in his body that had not yet dissipated was sufficient proof that he was treating her previously. Perhaps he just happened to be treating there. When a person loves another person very much, even if that person did something wrong, they would often think of the good. However, when she turned around, it gave Long Houchen a different feeling. His hand slid from her buttocks to the side, and Long Houchen only felt that his willpower had experienced a more terrifying test than the spiritual stove synthesis. His entire body was stiff. Don't forget, he was a young and vigorous virgin, and he developed faster than his peers, and was also much more mature. Idiot, hurry up and put on my clothes. Kai buried her face in his waist and said softly. Oh. Hearing Kai-Er's voice, Long Houchen hurriedly released his own clothes from the eternal melody. He did not have to worry about how to put on her clothes. Kai-Er had already stood up from the water with a swoosh. Her movements were very fast, and with a slight turn of her delicate body, Long Houchen's clothes had already tightly wrapped around her delicate body. However, because it was only a shirt, it naturally could not avoid revealing a pair of slender thighs. Although the key parts were covered, the more it was like this, the more mysterious and alluring it was. Long Houchen stared at her blankly. His eyesight was incomparably good, and although he had only caught a glimpse of Kai-Er putting on her clothes, he seemed to have seen what he should have seen and what he shouldn't have seen. He did not even dare to move now, for fear that the fire in his heart would erupt. Even more so, he did not dare to make any intimate moves towards Kai. At this moment, he was like dry firewood that had been splashed with oil and could turn into a raging fire at any time. Looking at Long Houchen's handsome face that was flushed red, and his eyes were dull, Kai only stole a glance at him, and quickly ran behind him. Don't peek. Oh, Long Houchen reluctantly agreed, but the movement of his Adam's apple moving up and down as he swallowed his saliva gave him away. Kai-Er's thighs were not quite the same as Yiting's. Long Houchen was shocked to find that such a thought had actually appeared in his mind. Although Yiting was very beautiful, and her pair of long legs were slender, straight, smooth, and flawless, but compared to Kai-Er she was still lacking a lot. Kai-Er's legs were a little more lustrous than hers, and they were also filled with the faint fragrance of a human girl. More importantly, looking at her legs, although Long Houchen was embarrassed, he didn't feel any psychological burden. All right, let's go. Kai-Er's gentle voice sounded behind him. Long Houchen turned around somewhat mechanically, and immediately saw that Kai-Er had already changed into her black outfit, covering up all the beauty from before. She also handed Long Houchen's clothes to him. Long Houchen heaved a huge sigh of relief and took back his clothes. However, when he touched Kai-Er's fingertips, he could no longer suppress the fire in his heart. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her lip. His hand also accidentally fell back to the spot under the water, and he carelessly rubbed it twice through the clothes. The Son of Light was not a saint. Even if he was a saint, there would be times when he could not bear it. Fortunately, there was still the clothes separating them. Do not look indecently, as Kai-Er's injuries were quite serious. Long Houchen could only temporarily stabilize her. Therefore, no matter how hot his heart was, he could only indulge for a while, and quickly brought Kai-Er back to the dream shrine. Yiting, continue to treat Kai-Er, Long Houchen said to Yiting, who was floating in the air, seemingly dissatisfied with being left behind. At this moment, Kai-Er was still very weak, and did not notice anything different about Yiting. Long Houchen turned to Zhang Fangfang and said, Brother Zhang, please wait here for a while. I have to send my companions away first. This method is the biggest secret of our team, so I hope that Brother Zhang will not ask or tell anyone. Zhang Fangfang nodded and smiled. Don't worry. As he spoke, he walked in front of Wang Yuanyuan and said, Knock me out. Wang Yuanyuan was stunned. Zhang Fangfang looked at her deeply and said, Only when you can't see, hear, or feel anything can you really keep a secret, right? Long Houchen hurriedly said, "Brother Zhang, you don't have to do this." Before he could finish, Wang Yuanyuan's palm had already landed on the side of Zhang Fangfang's neck. Zhang Fangfang's body went limp, and he fell to the ground with Wang Yuanyuan's help. Lin Xian couldn't help but say, "Yuanyuan, you really did it." Wang Yuanyuan glared at him and said, "Do you want to try?" "No, there's no need." Lin Xian hurriedly waved his hands. Wang Yuanyuan glanced at the unconscious Zhang Fangfang and thought to herself, "Serves you right for messing with my heart." It was getting late, and Long Haochen didn't dare to delay any further. He left Zhang Fangfang, Kair and Yiting here. He activated the eternal melody and teleported his teammates over. Sima Xian and Chen Ying-er's injuries had completely stabilized, but they were still in a deep sleep. Their injuries weren't as serious as Kai-er's, and after continuous treatment, they needed time to recuperate. With a flash of golden light, Long Haochen reappeared in the Dream Temple. Feeling the changes in the light elements in the air, his eyes revealed a hint of surprise. After awakening his blessed constitution, his control over the light elements had increased significantly, and even his control over the eternal melody had become much finer. Moreover, he was now in the Dream Temple, not the Dream Paradise, so teleporting back and forth didn't consume as much spiritual energy. After waking up Zhang Fangfang and letting Yiting return to his body, Long Haochen and the others walked out of the Dream Temple. 3 days wasn't a long time, but neither was it short, but both the Temple League and the demons were waiting anxiously. After all, those who entered the Dream Temple this time were all very important figures for both sides. On the demons' side, there were 10 young powerhouses with the strength of an inheritor. On the Temple League side, there were also 10 demon hunters, including the Holy Sun and the Reincarnation Maiden. Both sides couldn't help but feel nervous. When they saw figures walking out of the dark green temple, Ling Xiao and Huang Shua couldn't help but stand up and quickly went to the lakeside. The powerhouses from both sides were also at each other's throat. If anything happened, the battle was likely to break out in an instant. Long Haochen walked in front. When he appeared, Han Qiu felt as if he had lost all his strength. He subconsciously turned around to look at the Temple Knight, then looked at Long Haochen calmly, ready to defend against the demon's surprise attack at any time. Behind Long Haochen was Kair and then Zhang Fangfang. Ying Suifeng and Ling Xiao heaved a sigh of relief at the same time. No matter what, the most important people, the Holy Sun and the Reincarnation Maiden, had returned alive. Moreover, they seemed to have gained something from it. However, Ling Xiao's expression quickly turned ugly, because only the 3 of them had walked out of the Dream Temple. As for the demon's Black Dragon Guard commander Huang Shua, his expression was even uglier. The first to come out was a human, which was not good news for him. Soon, Long Haochen and the other 2 returned to the Temple League under Ling Xiao's personal guidance. "The others haven't come out yet?" Ling Xiao asked Long Haochen. Long Haochen sighed and lowered his head slightly. His expression told Ling Xiao many things. Ling Xiao's expression suddenly turned livid. Those were the commander-level monster hunters. This meant that the 7 monster hunters were in danger of disbanding. This responsibility had to be borne by the Temple of the Priests. Long Haochen looked coldly at the demons and said in a deep voice, "The 10 demons that went and had their cultivation suppressed, and there was no lack of stage 8 powerhouses. Their external spiritual energy was as high as 20,000. Under such circumstances we are no match for them at all." "What?" Ling Xiao exclaimed. On the other side, Han Qiu tugged on Long Haochen's sleeve, signaling him to stop talking. There was no doubt that the Temple of the Priests had to bear a huge responsibility this time. This was because they were the ones leading the cooperation with the Devil Race. Long Haochen turned his head to look at Han Qiu and nodded to the Grandmaster, indicating that he understood what he meant. Ling Xiao's aura was obviously a little unstable, and the human powerhouses on the Temple League side were also ready to make a move at any time. Huang Shua's side was also awe-inspiring. With the heaven-defying demon dragon clan as the leader, they were confident that their overall strength was definitely superior to these humans in front of them, and they were absolutely not afraid to make a move. However, Huang Shuo still suppressed the murderous intent in his heart as much as possible, because he could clearly feel that there had been a powerful aura hidden in the enemy's formation for the past few days, and the terrifying pressure was constantly shocking him, as if as long as he made the slightest movement, he would suffer a devastating blow. One must know that Huang Shuo was not an ordinary Stage 9 powerhouse. His strength had reached the peak of Stage 2 Level 9, and his total spiritual energy was close to 300,000. Among the demons, he was also one of the few powerhouses. He was the real right-hand man of the Demon Emperor. Even he could feel the huge pressure. It could be seen how terrifying the strength of the other party's powerhouse was. With such a person around, once the battle broke out, then the demon's losses would definitely be considerable. After all, this was the human territory. Long Haochen said loudly. However, the demons also paid a considerable price. Although they are all powerhouses who entered this time, at the same time, they are also the heirs of some demon gods, and their leader, Abao, is the heir of the demon emperor. They also did not gain any advantage. As he said that, he flipped his wrist, and a greenish-black flame appeared in his palm. This flame was obviously not something that the light attribute Long Haochen could release. Everyone focused their eyes and saw a crystal in the shape of a crown appearing in his palm. It was the inheritance crown magic crystal of the green flame demon Shen Shang. Seeing this magic crystal, the powerhouses of the Temple League couldn't help but exclaim in surprise. At the same time, they also confirmed the authenticity of what Long Haochen said before. On the other side, Huang Shuo's complexion became extremely ugly. He obviously recognized who this magic crystal belonged to. Although the owner of this magic crystal wasn't the strongest among the powerhouses of the demon race that had entered the illusory paradise this time, his overall strength could be ranked in the top 5. However, he had fallen at the hands of Long Haochen. This was something that Huang Shuo had never expected. Looking at Long Haochen's appearance, he was only about 20 years old. Humans were different from demons, and one could roughly tell his age at a glance. A faint light flickered, and Long Haochen's eyes revealed a trace of cold light. He looked at Huang Shuo opposite him without the slightest bit of timidity. At least 3 of us left Dream Paradise alive, and you. At this point, he deliberately stopped. Even though Huang Shuo was calm, he couldn't help but feel flustered at this time. He looked at the dream temple in the distance, and his face turned pale for a moment. One must know that this time, there were the inheritors of the top 4 demons in order to obtain the spiritual stove, and at the same time, there was a secret order from the demon emperor. If all these inheritors fell in Dream Paradise, the blow to the demons would be unparalleled. It might even shake the foundation of the demons. Long Haochen had already taken out an inheritance crown in his hand. Who could say that he didn't have other inheritance crowns? Moreover, judging from his tone, the situation of Abao and the others in Dream Paradise was obviously not optimistic. "Tell me, how are they?" Huang Shuo shouted angrily. A sharp aura suddenly rose, and the terrifying pressure almost reached its peak in an instant. Even Dream Paradise, a place of life filled with the aura of nature, was actually covered in darkness at this time. Ling Xiao snorted coldly. A golden light flashed in his hand, and a milky white magic staff appeared in his grasp. A soft golden light spread out, easily blocking the dense dark aura outside, and covering everyone on his side with a layer of misty golden luster. He already had some understanding of Long Haochen's approach. Fortunately, he didn't say anything and let Long Haochen do whatever he wanted. The experts on the side of the Temple League had already released their weapons, and were ready to fight at any time. The pressure brought by Huang Shuo didn't affect Long Haochen. Instead, a faint smile appeared on his face. "Why should I tell you?" Huang Shuo looked at him coldly. If anything happens to them, we will definitely flatten Southern Pass and fight to the death with you humans at all costs. He said this resolutely. He wasn't very clear about the other races, but he was very clear about the situation of the heaven-defying Demon Dragon Clan. Currently, in the heaven-defying Demon Dragon Clan, the current Demon Emperor Feng Xiu only had 2 children, a Bao and Leng Xiao. This time, both of them had entered Dream Paradise. In his opinion, with a Bao's strength, no matter what, it was impossible for him to have any problems in Dream Paradise. Not slaughtering all these humans was already showing mercy, and they would definitely reap great rewards in this operation. This was also an important reason why the demons were willing to pay such a high price to obtain a place to enter Dream Paradise. However, he never expected that the situation would have such a strange change. The human casualties were indeed heavy. Only 3 out of 10 people who went in came out alive. Moreover, Kai Er's appearance was still very weak. However, the most important thing was that no one from the devil race had come out until now. The biggest disadvantage of the demons in this operation was their lack of understanding of Dream Paradise. All their understanding was based on the personal deduction of the Demon Emperor and some of the predictions of the Star Demon. In any case, at least A Bao and Ling Xiao had not come out yet, and there was also the Moon Demon's daughter. The Moon Demon's side was still fine. This time, Yu Yi could be said to have obtained a place because of her relationship with a Bao. However, the heaven-defying Demon Dragon Clan could not. Although the current Demon Emperor had not reached the age of old, his fertility had been reduced to the extent that it was almost impossible for him to have children again. In this case, if Leng Xiao and a Bao both died in Dream Paradise, it would be a devastating disaster for the heaven-defying Demon Dragon Clan. For a long time, the patriarch of the heaven-defying Demon Dragon Clan had been the Demon Emperor of each generation. He had inherited the purest heaven-defying Demon Dragon bloodline. There had never been a situation where the bloodline had fallen and another Demon Emperor had been chosen. Moreover, a Bao had now established a certain reputation in the heaven-defying Demon Dragon Clan. If they all died in battle this time, the Demon Emperor would definitely be furious. As the leader of the team, it was impossible for him not to be angry. Therefore, Huang Shua's eyes were a little red at this time. All his calmness was thrown away because of the cruelty of reality. He was ready to fight to the death. He would rather die in battle here than go back and bear the anger of the Demon Emperor. A faint light flickered and a cold light appeared in Long Haochen's eyes. It's not impossible to know their whereabouts. I can also tell you that not all of them died in battle. There are still some who are alive. However, why should I tell you about their situation? Long Haochen spoke very calmly. There was not even any extra expression on his face. However, after hearing his words, whether it was Han Qiu or Ling Xiao, they could not help but reveal a faint smile on their faces. This child was really too smart. Of course, they could also see that if Huang Shua was forced into a corner, he would definitely fight to the death here. The demons would certainly suffer heavy casualties, but would it be easy for the humans? After all, this was not like guarding Southern Pass, where there was a natural moat to rely on. This time, the majority of the demons who came here were rank 9 powerhouses. Even if they had just crossed the threshold of rank 9, without the assistance of any weapons, these demons were still not easy to deal with. They were led by the Black Dragon Guard. Chapter 117. Therefore, the demons didn't want to fight this battle, and neither did the humans. Long Haochen's words just now seemed simple, but it revealed something to Huang Shua. He clearly told Huang Shua that although the demons suffered losses in Fantasy Paradise, they weren't completely wiped out. It was just that he didn't explain their current situation. Giving Huang Shua some hope, he naturally wouldn't fight to the death. Not telling him the truth was naturally to gain more benefits from the demons. This was definitely what Ling Xiao and Han Qiu were very willing to see. This time, the loss of 7 outstanding young demon hunters was a big blow to the Temple League. Even if these 7 monster hunters didn't all disband, they must be rearranged. In this case, if they couldn't benefit from the demons, not only would the temple of the priests have to bear a certain amount of responsibility, but even Han Q would also have to bear the same responsibility. With their characters, it was impossible for them to evade anything at all. Sure enough, after listening to Long Houchen's words, Huang Shua's breathing stabilized a little. He raised his hand to signal his men not to act rashly. He walked in the direction of Long Houchen alone and stopped 20 meters away from Ling Xiao. "Tell me their situation. What do you want?" Huang Shua said coldly. Long Houchen said indifferently, "I want 10 heaven-defying demon dragon clans demonic crystals. You should have a lot of these things." "What did you say?" Huang Shua was furious, and a strong murderous intent erupted in an instant, but he was stopped by Ling Xiao again. The heaven-defying demon dragon clans demonic crystals and dragon paste were different. Dragon paste was a special substance secreted by the heaven-defying demon dragon clan. It was an excellent tonic for humans and demons, somewhat similar to musk. But magical crystals were different. Every mana crystal of the heaven-defying demon dragon clan was not just a treasure to their clan, but also a symbol of the dignity of the deceased heaven-defying demon dragon clan powerhouse. Whenever a heaven-defying demon dragon clan powerhouse died on the battlefield, they would find a way to retrieve their demonic crystal and worship it in the clan. Even the heaven-defying demon dragons would not use the magical crystals of their clansmen unless it was a matter of life and death, let alone give them to humans. In the history of the demons, there were very few times when humans obtained the magical crystal of the heaven-defying demon dragon, and every time it happened, the demons would launch a crazy counterattack. The demon emperor might even make a move because of this. Long Houchen calmly repeated his own words and strengthened his tone. "I want 10 heaven-defying demon dragon clans demonic crystals." And immediately. "The dream temple is about to sink, so it's not too late to give me the magical crystals now. Otherwise, when the dream temple sinks, it will be useless even if you give me more. Let me emphasize again, after I obtain these 10 magical crystals, I don't want to see the demons take any action against me or the Temple League. Because this is a transaction, not something I snatched." Huang Shua was so angry that he almost vomited blood. What did he think the heaven-defying demon dragon clan's magical crystals were? Jelly beans? Snatch them? You need to have the ability to do that. He turned his head and glanced at the dream temple. Sure enough, as Long Houchen said, the emerald light released by the dream temple began to gradually weaken. It seemed like it could return to the bottom of the lake at any time. Ling Xiao had also said before that there was a fairy dragon living at the bottom of the lake that had existed for tens of thousands of years. Huang Shua knew that he did not have the ability to compete with it, and even the demon emperor might not be able to win. More importantly, when that time came, would a Bao and the others still be able to survive? "Why should I believe you?" Huang Shua looked coldly at Long Houchen. "Moreover, I don't have so many magical crystals from my clan. I'm only the commander of the Black Dragon's personal guards. Only His Majesty has the authority to mobilize our clan's magical crystals." Long Houchen shrugged and said, "Then I can't do anything about it. You don't have magical crystals, but aren't there so many people here? It seems like you are not willing to give up your lives for the sake of Your Highness the Crown Prince." Huang Shua's breathing suddenly became heavy. If it was only the heaven-defying demon dragon clan that came this time, it would be better. However, it was not just that, there were also experts from other clans. Long Houchen's words were too hateful. As soon as these words came out, the experts from other clans couldn't help but look at Huang Shua and the Black Dragon's personal guards in a different light. This was also Long Houchen's cleverness. The demons were powerful, and there were experts from various clans here. More importantly, the demons that entered the dream paradise this time were also the heirs of various clans. Therefore, these experts were very concerned about the news of Long Houchen, but what Long Houchen asked for was only the magical crystals of the heaven-defying demon dragon clan. This caused the mentality of the other experts of the demons to change a little. Although they did not dare to say anything because of the strength of the heaven-defying demon dragon clan, they would definitely think in their hearts, "For your crown prince, you are not willing to give up your lives? Moreover, there are also the heirs of our clans." Huang Shuo suddenly fell into a dilemma. After a short silence, Huang Shuo looked coldly at Long Houchen. 3. I can only take out 3 of my clan's magical crystals to exchange with you. Moreover, how can you prove that you can make the dream paradise temporarily disappear and wait for our people to come out? Long Houchen smiled indifferently and said, 3 is impossible. I only want 10, not 1 more. However, 1 less won't do. Senior Huang, you have to make a decision quickly. As he said that, he pointed to the dream shrine. Sure enough, at this moment, the thorny shrubs connecting the dream shrine to the shore began to slowly disappear. The shrubs retracted towards the shore, and the dream shrine began to shake slightly, slowly sinking towards the lake. You! Huang Shuo turned pale with fright. If all the young experts of the demons had died in battle, he would have to bear the responsibility, but that would only be for this matter. However, after Long Houchen said these words, his responsibility would not be so simple. It was very likely that it was because of his command error that caused the deaths of so many heirs of the demon gods. When that time came, even his family would be implicated. No! Huang Shuo shouted. Strangely enough, after he shouted, the dream shrine actually stopped sinking. Huang Shuo was stunned. When he turned around to look at Long Houchen, he saw that Long Houchen had raised his left hand in the direction of the dream shrine. A faint green light crossed the surface of the lake and connected with the dream shrine. It seemed that he was actually controlling the dream shrine so that it did not sink. I think that my sincerity is enough. However, I can't hold on for too long, Long Houchen said solemnly. Zhang Fangfang, who was behind Long Houchen, walked to his side. This gentle-looking knight raised his hands and said calmly, 10, before anyone could understand what he meant. He retracted a finger. 9, 8, 7, F***CK, there's already a countdown? That's too ruthless. Han Qiu and Ling Xiao stared at Long Houchen and Zhang Fangfang, dumbfounded. Even they were nervous, let alone Huang Shuo. These 2 brats were too evil. No matter how they had grasped the enemy's movements, their teamwork was too good. Stop shouting, Huang Shuo shouted angrily. With a wave of his right hand, a light yellow leather pouch flew towards Long Houchen. In the end, he couldn't bear the huge pressure. Han Qiu moved in a flash and stood in front of Long Houchen, taking the leather pouch. When he opened it and looked inside, an extremely dense dark purple color was released from the pouch. Han Qiu was stunned. A trace of fanaticism appeared in his eyes. Then, he quickly tied up the pouch and nodded to Long Houchen. Long Houchen smiled calmly and said to Huang Shuo in surprise, I didn't expect Senior Huang to bring so many good things. In that case, we won't stand on ceremony. Thank you. In fact, he was just asking for a sky-high price and then returning the money. In the end, Zhang Fangfang's countdown had forced Huang Shuo to reveal his treasures. Hurry up and tell me, how are Bao and the others? Huang Shuo roared. His emotions were on the verge of exploding, and he could attack at any time. At this time, the Temple League powerhouses were also very nervous. The knight hidden among the Temple Knights, who had talked to Han Qiu alone before, stared coldly at Huang Shuo. A straight line of pressure connected him and Huang Shuo. The others didn't feel anything. However, Huang Shuo was suppressed by a domineering pressure and grunted. He took half a step back and his expression couldn't help but change again. To be able to suppress him to such an extent, even among the demons, perhaps only the top 10 demon gods could do it. Although he was confident that he could make his opponent suffer if he really fought with his life on the line, he would definitely die. Long Houchen also knew that he couldn't provoke Huang Shuo at this time and said in a deep voice, "We humans have always kept our promises. Since I've accepted Senior Huang's things, I will naturally tell you what I know. In the fantasy paradise we encountered you demons a few times. Our people were all killed by you demons. The inheritance crown in my hand was obtained by us killing a green flame demon. As for the other demons, we couldn't deal with them. They seemed to be deliberately opposing the fantasy paradise, causing the demonic beasts in the fantasy paradise to riot and fight them with all their strength. Because the three of us didn't kill the demonic beasts in the fantasy paradise, we didn't get involved. The riot went on until we came out. Among the demons, a few were killed or injured, while the rest were rescued by the demon emperor." Hearing this, although Huang Shuo's mind suddenly relaxed a lot, he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Just this piece of information made him pay the price of 10 of his clansmen's demonic crystals. Wasn't this price a little too high? It should be known that those 10 demonic crystals were left behind by the Black Dragon Guard who had fallen in the previous several battles. The reason why he always carried them was because every time the Demon Emperor went out, he might face the strongest human monster hunter's attacks. He was the Demon Emperor's right-hand man, and these demonic crystals were specially prepared for the Demon Emperor. His vision darkened. It's that simple?" Huang Shuo said through gritted teeth. Long Houchen pretended to recall for a while and said, "Oh, there's more. I remember that at that time, the demons called Abao said a few words to a demon with orange magic, and then the demons used a special orange magic to imprison the Fantasy Paradise Guardian's body. However, the man with the orange glow self-destructed just like that. His inheritance crown was obtained by Abao." What? There were 2-star demon powerhouses who had long orange-red hair and wore orange-red magic robes that came with Huang Shuo this time. When they heard this, they immediately cried out involuntarily even though they had grave expressions before. Great Prophecy Spell. Abao actually made him use the Great Prophecy Spell. It was obvious that Long Houchen's words could not be false, because his description of the Great Prophecy Spell was not wrong at all. Moreover, only the Great Prophecy Spell could have such a powerful effect. The one imprisoned was a guardian. Huang Shuo, you must give us an explanation for this matter. Otherwise, you will have to explain to Lord Star Demon when you return. The 2-star demon powerhouses came forward angrily. Huang Shuo's expression also turned a little ugly. Only he knew what the mission Demon Emperor gave to Abao was. He was not surprised that Abao ordered the Star Demon heir to use the Great Prophecy Spell. However, Long Houchen obviously had ill intentions for saying this at this time, but he had no way to refute it. In an instant, the atmosphere on the demon's side changed. Although this time, it was mainly the Black Dragon Guards who came out, there were also many powerhouses from other races. They were also the elites of their races. This time, their young master also entered. If Abao could make the star demons use the terrifying suicide forbidden magic like the Great Prophecy Spell, then how would he deal with their people? All of a sudden, the demons lost their unity. Huang Shuo's expression changed. He glared fiercely at Long Houchen. After memorizing this young man's appearance in his mind, he turned to the 2-star demons and said in a deep voice, "This matter has not been investigated clearly. If the young master has been rescued by His Majesty, we will definitely give Lord Star Demon an explanation when we return. Moreover, we can't confirm whether what that human said is the truth." At this moment, the dream shrine had already sunk into the lake. Even if they wanted to verify anything, they couldn't do it. Moreover, they couldn't enter the dream temple at all. Under the cover of Ling Xiao and Han Qiu, Long Houchen retreated into the protection of the Temple League powerhouses. Huang Shuo's eyes were filled with unwillingness as he glared at these humans, and he bellowed, "Let's go." After saying this, he led the group of devil experts away with their tails between their legs. Ling Xiao didn't order them to leave the dream forest immediately. Instead, He called Long Haochen, Kair and Zhang Fangfang together and asked them in detail about what happened in Dream Paradise. In addition to hiding the fact that he brought his companions into the Dream Paradise through the Tower of Eternity, Long Haochen explained the process of entering Dream Paradise in detail. In the end, when Bao and the others failed to capture Yi Xiaolei, he simply said that the demonic beasts in Dream Paradise were powerful. He didn't flaunt anything. After listening to Long Haochen, Ling Zhao's expression turned ugly. Yes, the demons suffered a lot this time, but at the same time they were tricked. Godhead. Long Haochen didn't know much about godheads, but as a Stage 9 powerhouse and the temple master of the Temple of the Priests, Ling Zhao knew a little about it. He vaguely guessed that the demon emperor's cultivation must have reached a certain level and needed a godhead to further enhance his strength. Moreover, once he obtained the godhead, the calamity of mankind would come. At that time, perhaps no one would be able to stop him. And this godhead was actually in the Dream Shrine. Just like how Huang Shua couldn't be sure that the demon emperor could defeat the spirit dragon guarding the Dream Shrine, Ling Zhao couldn't be sure that the spirit dragon could really protect the Dream Shrine. Thinking of this, Ling Zhao's face turned a little pale. After hesitating for a moment, he instructed some powerhouses of the Southern Guard Pass to stay behind to guard the Dream Forest and report the situation here at any time. Only then did he bring everyone back to the Southern Guard Pass. Although Han Qiu was also surprised that the Demon Emperor could tear open the space of the Dream Paradise, he was still in a good mood. 10. That was a whole 10 heaven-defying demon dragon demonic crystals. The demonic crystals of a Stage 9 heaven-defying demon dragon were rare treasures. It could be said that every demonic crystal of the heaven-defying demon dragon could be exchanged for an epic equipment. From this, one could see how precious they were. Although they were of the dark attribute, the energy contained within them was extremely pure. In the hands of some master alchemists, their effects were unparalleled. Long Haochen originally expressed that he wanted to give all of these demonic crystals to the Southern Guard Pass. But how could Ling Zhao accept such a big gift? It wasn't until Long Haochen said that it was in return for the Dream Gem that Ling Zhao agreed to accept 2 of them. Han Qiu took 3 without hesitation. He was Long Haochen's grandmaster. Moreover, these things were definitely more useful in his hands than in Long Haochen's. The remaining 5 were given to Long Haochen to deal with. Even if he took 3, it wasn't for nothing. These things could be exchanged for merit points. As for the specific amount, Han Qiu didn't say, and Long Haochen didn't ask. Anyway, Han Qiu told Long Haochen that he would know when he went to the Monster Hunter's mission tower to receive the next mission after returning to the Holy City. This operation was a failure for the demons, but it definitely wasn't a success for the humans either. They still had many follow-up matters to deal with. On the way back, Long Haochen asked Ling Zhao to treat Kai Er's injuries. Ling Zhao had just taken 2 of the heaven-defying demon dragon's demonic crystals. Naturally, he spared no effort and cast a 9th-grade healing spell. Before returning to the Southern Guard Pass, Kai Er was completely healed by this powerful healing spell. Her spiritual power even increased. After returning to the main hall of the Temple of the Priests, Han Qiu and Ling Zhao didn't pay attention to Long Haochen and hurriedly went to the meeting. Long Haochen and Kai Er also temporarily separated from Zhang Fangfang and returned to their secret room on the 1st underground floor. Long Haochen, what's wrong? Why is your complexion so unsightly? Kai Er looked suspiciously at Long Haochen, whose complexion had suddenly turned pale. Long Haochen said in a deep voice, "It's Haoyue. Haoyue is calling me. I'm afraid that its evolution is in trouble again. Kai Er, I have to go now. Take me with you. Since the Tower of Eternity can even break the rules of Fantasy Paradise, it must be able to break the rules of Haoyue's space. It's just that it's been less than 12 hours since you last teleported." Long Haochen shook his head and said, 12 hours is not necessary. He didn't have time to think too much. He took Kai Er's hand and quickly returned to the Tower of Eternity under the golden light of the eternal melody. After the awakening of the Blessed Constitution, the relationship between Long Houchen and the eternal melody seemed to have changed. There was no need to wait for 12 hours. He vaguely felt that if he teleported by himself, he could directly return to the Tower of Eternity at any time. If he brought his companions, although it would still take some time, it wouldn't be as long as 12 hours. Among his companions, the only one who could fight at full strength was Kai. Wang Yuanyuan felt a little lost. Long Houchen thought she was injured. Therefore, after returning to the Tower of Eternity, Long Houchen didn't tell them about Haoyue and directly returned to the Temple of the Priest. The next moment, a purple light spread all over his body. The power of the blood contract between Long Houchen and Haoyue bloomed and directly produced a teleportation effect. At this time, Long Houchen still clearly remembered the danger he faced when Haoyue evolved last time. At that time, Long Houchen was only a grade 4 knight. His strength was far from what it was now. It was really difficult. Fortunately, he was lucky and saved Haoyue in the end. Long Houchen was now a grade 6 knight. Moreover, after the battle in Fantasy Paradise, he awakened the Blessed Constitution, and his spiritual power had greatly improved. Not only did his internal spiritual power increase to 7,000, but his external spiritual power also increased dramatically. As to what extent, Long Houchen didn't know. But it was definitely not comparable to before. Therefore, he was very confident in rescuing Haoyue. Now he was even more looking forward to seeing how Haoyue would evolve. He didn't know how powerful Haoyue would become after the evolution this time. During the last evolution, Haoyue evolved a third head. Then for a long time after that, Haoyue ate a large number of magic crystals. Even Long Houchen didn't know how many. But every time on the battlefield, Haoyue was the one who benefited the most. Therefore, it was able to enter a deep sleep for evolution so quickly. The more time he spent with Haoyue, the more Long Houchen was curious about Haoyue's origin. When it first appeared, it seemed to be just a weak magical beast. But as time passed, the strength and ability Haoyue displayed became stronger and stronger. The most powerful thing was its evolution ability. In just 2 short years, it would definitely break through to grade 6 after the evolution. This kind of evolution speed was Long Houchen had never heard of before. What made Long Houchen most curious was the Demon Emperor's attention to Haoyue. He was almost sure that the Demon Emperor was looking for Haoyue. Thinking of the Demon Emperor's desire to obtain a godhead from the Dream Paradise, Long Houchen couldn't help but wonder if Haoyue had a godhead too. However, he quickly rejected this idea. It was too absurd. With a flash of purple light, the moment he felt his feet on the ground, Long Houchen's body immediately bloomed with a layer of holy light shield, enveloping his body. It was not the first time he came to the world where Haoyue was originally from, and the turbid space here was still fresh in his memory. If the Dream Shrine was a dream paradise, then this place with black and red as the main colors could be called Hell. As soon as he appeared, Long Houchen felt a strong aura of death. A familiar and restless person was right in front of him. It was Haoyue. At this moment, Haoyue's whole body was shrouded in a thick layer of purple light. His 3 heads were raised and his eyes were closed, constantly alternating incantations. He could feel that the turbid elemental energy in the air was constantly rushing towards Haoyue. After being filtered by the layer of purple light around his body, it would turn into specks of purple light and fuse into Haoyue's body. Compared to when they parted, Haoyue's body had grown a little bigger. He was close to 8 meters tall, and his whole body had become thicker. The 2 protrusions on his back were even taller, each in a triangular shape. The biggest change was on his head. The protrusion on the left side of his 3 heads was almost as tall as the other 3 heads, while the protrusion on the right side maintained the same appearance as when they were separated. "Good brother, I'm coming," You work hard to evolve and leave the rest to me." As he spoke, Long Houchen turned and walked out. This time, Hao Yue chose a cave for his evolution. When he walked to the entrance of the cave, he could not help but be slightly stunned. The place Hao Yue chose was similar to the last time he evolved. It was still halfway up the mountain, and there were obvious traces of the cave being excavated. It must have been made by himself. The sky was dark and gloomy, and not a single star could be seen. In the air, there was a strong concentration of dark and fire elements. There were also elements of other attributes, but they were very heterogeneous and not as abundant as the dark and fire elements. As far as the eye could see, there were countless cracks on the ground. He could even see rivers of lava intertwining. What kind of world was this? Other than the deathly stillness, Long Houchen could not feel any signs of life in this place. He focused and spread his senses. Fortunately, there were no enemies at the moment. After his body was awakened, Long Houchen could spread his senses over a relatively large area even in this place full of deathly stillness. After thinking for a while, Long Houchen tried to communicate with Eternal Melody. He wanted to see if he could enter the Tower of Eternity and meet up with his companions in a short period of time. Just as he injected spiritual energy into Eternal Melody, a strange scene appeared in his mind. He felt that he could directly be transported to the Tower of Eternity and was no longer bound by time. But more importantly, he was surprised to find that he could actually feel the location of his companions in the Tower of Eternity and could directly transport them to his side. This change brought about a great surprise. Long Houchen could not help but be overjoyed. With such a change, it would undoubtedly greatly increase their ability to survive when faced with danger in the future. Moreover, with this change in Eternal Melody, he did not need to be in a hurry to summon Kaer to his side. This was because after Hao Yue completed her evolution, he could follow Hao Yue back to his own world, but the companions that he brought here would need to pass through the Tower of Eternity to leave. Long Houchen did not need to wait to communicate with the Tower of Eternity, but it would still take a certain amount of time to transport people over. He did a simple calculation and found that he would have to wait for half an hour for each person he brought. At this moment, suddenly, Long Houchen raised his eyebrows and looked into the distance. It was almost the same as the last time. A large number of black skeletons were rushing over here. Looking at the large number of skeletons, Long Houchen could not help but remember what the Lich said last time. At that time, he was very nervous and focused all his body and mind on protecting Hao Yue. After that, he went back and continued to participate in the competition, so he did not think about it. However, his amazing memory allowed him to remember what the Lich said. Now that he thought about it, Long Houchen could not help but have a strange feeling in his heart. At that time, the Lich said, "No, you are guarding the reincarnated Demon King, the creator of this darkness and fire. It is because of its existence that this world has become like this. Space cracked and magma flowed on the earth. Countless races became extinct because of it. The powerful races escaped, and those who could not escape all became undead, and only the undead can live in this world of darkness and fire. Human, I do not know what method it used to lure you here, but the aura of light on your body disgusts me, and your behavior makes me even more angry. I will give you a chance, go back to your own plane. Today, Austin Griffin's aura just happened to appear in my territory. Although I am only a lich, I must kill it. Otherwise, no one knows what kind of destruction it will bring to our world again when it recovers. The reincarnated Demon King? The creator of darkness and fire? Is it because of Hao Yue that this world has become like this? This is unbelievable." Long Houchen shook his head hard. He could not believe the Lich's words. Moreover, he hated the fact that his trust in Hao Yue was shaken. He still clearly remembered that when he summoned Hao Yue on the Knight's Holy Mountain, it was him who used his blood to save Hao Yue's life. Similarly, without Hao Yue, he might have died on the battlefield. All these years, Hao Yue had always been with him, It could be said that other than his parents, Hao Yue was the closest person to him. Even Kai did not spend as much time with him as Hao Yue. Long Haochen had never treated Hao Yue as a mount, it was his brother, his best brother. The trust in his brother made Long Haochen feel a little doubtful, but it quickly became firm. Would he rather trust the enemy than his brother? Absolutely not. Thinking of this, his heart suddenly became calm, and there was only a strong fighting spirit in his eyes. At this moment, silhouettes began to float from afar, and advance together with the skeleton army below, almost as if they were one. Wasn't that the lich that was stepping on the black clouds with green flames flashing in its eyes? Long Haochen did a simple count, there were actually as many as 12 lich. Moreover, as they got closer, he also realized that the skeletons below were different from the ones he encountered last time. The skeletons he encountered last time were only the size of ordinary humans, and their attack and defense were very weak. This time, the skeletons were more than 2 meters tall, and although they were still black, their bones were much thicker, and many of them held weapons like bone blades in their hands. Without a doubt, these strengthened skeletons were under the control of the dozens of lich in the sky. As long as these lich were destroyed, the threat of the skeletons below would naturally be eliminated. However, Long Haochen did not rush into action, and instead retreated to the entrance of the cave. Light flashed, and Yiting slowly appeared behind him, floating in the air. Feeling the surrounding environment, Yiting suddenly frowned. "Master, it's so dirty here." She had just left Fantasy Paradise, and suddenly came to such a hellish place. It would be strange if she could feel good. Long Haochen said in a deep voice, "This is the space where Hao Yue originally resided, and it is at a critical moment of its evolution, we have to protect it. Go back to your strongest state, the battle is about to begin." A layer of light golden light spread from Yiting's body, and in a flash, she had already turned back into a tall and slender girl. The soft golden light blended with Long Haochen's body, and as they complemented each other, they immediately felt the transparency and comfort brought by the light. The skeletons were getting closer and closer, and the 12 lich were floating about 200 meters away from the entrance of the cave. Dark green willow, the wisps danced in the lich's eyes, and they continuously chanted in a low voice. Rays of black or gray light sprinkled down from the sky on the skeletons' bodies. Immediately, the skeletons' speed increased, and even their aura became stronger. With the brilliant holy shield in his left hand and light's retribution in his right, Long Haochen took a small step forward, and made himself slightly away from the entrance of the cave. He coldly glanced at the 12 lich in the air, and was already prepared for battle. Finally, the first skeleton climbed up, and rushed forward a few steps stiffly. The bone blade in its hand went straight for Long Haochen's head. After experiencing the test of the skeletons in the Tower of Eternity, Long Haochen did not feel the slightest bit of pressure when facing this black skeleton. He blocked it with Light's retribution in his right hand, and the skeleton's bone blade immediately shattered into pieces. Light's retribution then went down, and a mysterious golden arc suddenly imprinted on the skeleton's chest. Suddenly, the skeleton's body suddenly shattered. At this time, more skeletons climbed up, and with their stiff steps, they pounced towards Long Haochen. The Light's retribution sword swept across, and the sharp golden light spread out for about 10 meters, forming a fan shape. Within the range of the golden light, all the black skeletons were cut in half, and the holy aura brought by the light instantly destroyed their soul fires. After completing the awakening as a god's favored, Long Haochen's originally very pure light elemental spiritual power not only had a richer holy effect, it was also more concentrated. Just like Lin Xin who obtained the spiritual stove of heart flame, his light elemental had completely changed. It completely suppressed these dark elemental undead creatures. Chapter 118. It was the same sea of skeletons, and this time it was a sea of evolved skeletons. However, Long Haochen had a much easier time dealing with them than the last time. This was because his strength had increased by a large margin. When he was guarding Haoyue previously, he had just advanced from level 4 to level 5. This time, however, he had already reached level 5 or level 6. Coupled with the boost from the awakening of the Oracle, it was naturally not a problem for him to face these low-level undead creatures. When the 12 liches in the distance saw Long Houchen's radiant golden aura, the green flames in their eyes flickered violently, showing their uneasiness. The holy aura of the extremely pure light element gave them a strong sense of uneasiness and danger. What surprised Long Houchen was that the skeletons that continued to climb up seemed to have sensed the rich light element aura in the air, and they actually did not dare to move forward. Sharp whistling sounds came from the liches' mouths, and the bone staffs emitted an even stronger death aura. Immediately, the skeletons in front of them began to collapse. A large number of skeletons shattered in the process of climbing up the mountain, and quickly fused together. This move again? The last time Long Houchen was almost killed by this move. This was the Skeleton King that the liches were good at. Moreover, this time, the 12 liches were moving together, and the Skeleton King that they formed was either stronger or more numerous. Long Houchen was no longer who he was in the past. How could he give these liches a chance? Yiting! Long Houchen shouted in a low voice. At the same time, a dazzling golden light suddenly bloomed from his back, and 4 huge wings spread out in an instant. With just a flap, his body had already rushed towards the 12 liches. Long Houchen's spiritual wings were different from Yiting's light wings. Yiting's light wings were transparent like dragonfly wings, but they were more beautiful. On the other hand, Long Houchen's spirit wings weren't slow at all. The feathers were like the wings of a bird. Yiting's incantation was already ready. She flapped her 6 wings and took over Long Houchen's previous position at the entrance of the cave. She raised the staff in her hand and flapped the 6 wings on her back. Rich light elements bloomed in the air in an instant and turned into fist-sized balls of dazzling light that flew towards the skeletons. Star Rain. Although there were no light elements here, Yiting had not only gone through 3 evolutions, but also received the nourishment of Long Houchen's God's chosen physique and the fusion of the Saint's spiritual stove. Right now, her strength was already equivalent to a peak 6th rank magician. Since she had spent so much time preparing this spell, it was only natural that it would not be a simple Tier 6 spell. Rather, it was a powerful Tier 7 spell. Yiting's greatest strength was that her body was formed by the condensation of light elements. Therefore, she did not need to worry about lacking spiritual power like human magicians. Apart from the strength limit, unless her elemental energy was completely exhausted, she could continue to cast spells. Of course, if it was truly exhausted, it would also indicate Yiting's death. Star Rain, Tier 7 spell. Moreover, it was a Tier 7 light spell exclusive to the elves. This was something that humans simply could not do. A large number of golden light stars smashed into the group of skeletons. What was even more frightening was that these light stars seemed to have grown eyes, specifically looking for the center of the Skeleton King's fusion position. Golden halos blossomed in the sea of skeletons, and wherever the golden light passed, the skeletons instantly turned into flying ashes. The Skeleton Kings that were originally about to fuse also collapsed in an instant, simply unable to complete their fusion. At this time, Long Houchen had already arrived in front of the 12 necromancers. After the 2 wings turned into 4, Long Houchen's flying speed also increased. Although he was still not very good at flying and lacked the time to train, he was still able to increase his speed in a straight line. Hence, the 12 necromancers only saw a flash of golden light, and in the next moment, Long Houchen had already arrived in front of them. Pale with fright, the 12 necromancers let out a shrill cry almost at the same time. This was one of the necromancer's unique skills, the scream of fear. It was somewhat similar to the demonic voice-penetrating brain skill of human assassins. Moreover, it was even more powerful, as the necromancers themselves relied on soul energy to exist. The first time Long Houchen faced a necromancer, he had already suffered a loss. However, this time, the scream of fear would obviously not have any effect on him. The way Long Houchen dealt with it was very simple. He added light ripple to his holy light barrier. No matter how strong the scream of fear of these necromancers was, it could not compare to the scream of the vengeful spirits in the Wailing Howl Cave. Long Houchen was able to comprehend light ripple there, so why would he be afraid of their tiny screams? In the void, Long Houchen took a step forward, forcibly cutting into the group of necromancers. Immediately after, the light retribution in his right hand had already transformed into countless golden shadows. It was the demon destruction flash. The necromancers' strength lay in their souls, not their physical bodies. Faced with the suppression of the holy aura of Long Houchen's oracle, the power of their souls was greatly limited. How could their physical bodies withstand the tyrannical attack of the demon destruction flash? The bodies of the 12 necromancers were almost instantly penetrated. Immediately after, streaks of golden flames automatically burned on their bodies. Be it their bodies or souls, they were all engulfed by the golden flames. The ability of a oracle after awakening was the holy light flame. In other words, any attack of Long Houchen's would have the effect of the holy light flame. The holy light flame was a skill that other knight could also learn, but it would have to be at the 7th rank. Moreover, once the holy light flame was used, it consumed a lot of spiritual power. However, as an oracle, Long Houchen did not have to worry about this at all. It could be said that after this awakening, the advantages of Long Houchen's physique as the son of holy light began to be fully displayed, allowing him to start to surpass the knight of the same rank. The sea of skeletons below lost the command of the necromancers and immediately began to disperse. In just a short while, the seemingly endless sea of black skeletons quietly disappeared. Long Houchen shook his head slightly. Obviously, he was not very satisfied with the battle just now. The main reason for his dissatisfaction was that he was not familiar with his own abilities after awakening. If he had predicted that these necromancers would be so easy to deal with, he would not have let Yiting release such a powerful magic as the Star Rain. Seeing that all the skeletons below had disappeared, he heaved a sigh of relief and flew back to the entrance of the cave. However, because he did not use enough strength, he staggered when he landed. Seems like I really need to practice my flying ability. Long Houchen shook his head helplessly. His words were not without purpose. Many battles between true powerhouses were fought in the air. This was because the air could avoid harming allies and destroying the ground. Even the ferocious demons were often unwilling to fight with humans on the ground. Yiting chuckled and said, "Master, you humans are born not to fly. It's normal for you to not be able to fly well." Long Houchen looked at her with a strange gaze. After Yiting could speak, he was really not used to it. The key point was that he was a little embarrassed. He had not thought about how to talk to Kai or about Yiting's problem. At this moment, suddenly, Long Houchen's expression changed slightly. He looked into the distance, and a sudden ominous premonition appeared in his mind, as if a huge danger was approaching. He had already killed the 12 necromancers and their skeleton army. Why would there be such a strong threat? What was it? Yiting's perception was not weaker than Long Houchen's. Moreover, she and Long Houchen were one. Since Long Houchen felt it, she naturally felt it too. She looked into the distance in surprise. "Master, there seems to be a very unpleasant smell coming our way. Its target seems to be us." Long Houchen took a deep breath, and his body emitted a layer of soft golden light. The 4 wings on his back flapped gently, absorbing a very small amount of light elements in the air. In this world of black and red, there were not completely no light element. If it were another light mage or knight, it would be difficult to get supplies here. However, Long Houchen was a god's favored. Although he could not borrow the power of the god of light from his plane, He was still extremely strong in absorbing and sensing light elements. Get ready for battle. No matter what kind of enemy comes, we must guard the cave entrance before Haoyue's evolution is complete. Yiting agreed obediently. She took a step back and stood behind Long Haochen. She looked at her master in front of her with a pair of beautiful eyes that were very gentle. Her loyalty to Long Haochen was no longer as simple as the contract. It was precisely because of Long Haochen's existence that she was given a new life. Gradually, the powerful threat was becoming stronger and stronger. Long Haochen looked into the distance, and the uneasiness in his heart was also becoming stronger. What is that? Suddenly, his pupils shrank, and then he stared in one direction. In his line of sight, a strange creature appeared. They looked very much like humans. They had the same limbs, body, and head, but the way they moved was not at all like humans. Their legs were constantly jumping, and their hands were stretched out in front of their body. Every time they jumped, they would jump at least 2 or 3 feet forward. They were flying towards them. At first, there were only a few of them. As time passed, large numbers of these strange creatures appeared in front of Long Haochen and Yiting. Zombies, those are zombies. Yiting cried out involuntarily. Long Haochen asked in shock, "What are zombies? Are they a type of undead creature?" Yiting nodded and said, "It's a very powerful undead creature. Their rank can't be compared to the necromancers, but they are much stronger than skeletons. Zombies are also transformed from dead humans. Their bodies have been corroded by the energy of death, but they did not rot. Moreover, their souls have been infected by the undead. Most zombies only have battle instincts. Their bodies are as hard as iron, and their attack power and destructive power aren't something skeletons can compare to. Moreover, their bodies carry strong corpse poison and plague. As long as they attack you, you'll immediately be affected by the poison. Why are there so many zombies?" In just a short while, over 1,000 zombies had appeared in front of them. "Master, the situation is not good. These zombies are at least as strong as a grade 3 human warrior. Their bodies are the best weapons. Only at the grade 3 level?" Long Haochen asked, his heart calming down a little. With his current cultivation, he should be able to defend against over 1,000 grade 3 zombies. Yiting's eyes narrowed as she said, "Master, the biggest difference between zombies and skeletons is not only their strength, but also their potential for growth. It is extremely difficult for skeletons to evolve, unless they have the help of a powerful lich or even a lich. However, zombies can evolve naturally through killing and devouring. These 1,000 zombies cannot all be at the grade 3 level. It is possible that there are more." "Zombies have different levels? They can evolve naturally?" Hearing this, Long Haochen could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. He was no longer as optimistic as before. Yiting nodded her head and said, "If I remember correctly, zombies are categorized according to their strength. From low to high, they are normal zombies, vengeful spirits zombies, metal zombies, and so on. Among them, the most powerful were the various metal zombies. Their ability to evolve was the strongest. Their ability to evolve is also terrifying, and the strongest zombie king can even fly." Just as she said this, she suddenly noticed that Long Haochen's gaze seemed to be fixed on something. She hurriedly followed Long Haochen's gaze, and saw a huge zombie flying towards them at a shocking speed. The zombie below also had a layer of dark green on its body, and its speed increased. "Zombie King, there's actually a Zombie King?" Yiting's face instantly turned pale and she screamed, "Zombie King, it's really a Zombie King." Long Haochen calmed down at this moment. "Yiting, how strong can a Zombie King be?" Yiting shook her head blankly. "I don't know. I only heard that the Zombie King is the weakest undead lord in the undead world. However, no matter how weak it is still an overlord. I'm afraid it's at least at the grade 8 or even the grade 9. Hearing this, Long Haochen could not help but suck in a breath of cold air, and his pupils contracted violently. However, his right hand that was holding the light's punishment became extraordinarily stable. He had said that no matter how strong the opponent was, he would definitely protect Long Haoyue, so that he could evolve smoothly. Yiting did not speak again. Instead, she began to chant an incantation. Her voice was crisp and pleasant, as if she was influenced by Long Haochun's determination, and the fear in her heart had disappeared. The zombie king was the fastest flying in the air. In the blink of an eye, it had already reached the mountainside. It immediately saw Long Haochun with his 4 wings spread open on his back. It suddenly stopped moving forward, and stared at Long Haochun with a hint of doubt. Human, a human with the light element? How can there be a human here? The zombie king's voice was as loud as a bell, and a strong aura of death was emitted from its body. Just like how a lich strengthened the skeletons, the zombie king's presence had obviously strengthened the zombies below. "Hello, zombie lord, what business do you have here?" Long Haochun asked calmly. If the zombie king did not attack, of course, he would not initiate a fight. He was here to buy time. The zombie king did not attack Long Haochun directly. It had a ferocious appearance, and was around 3.5 meters tall. It floated in the air, and had a pair of disgusting wings on its back. One side was covered in gray feathers, while the other side looked like a bat. No matter how one looked at it, the uncoordinated pair of wings seemed to have been installed later. The zombie king's face was actually very handsome, but it was a deathly gray color, and the eyeballs in its eye sockets were dark green. A layer of green mist was faintly emitted from its body, and the thick stench could be faintly smelled even from 100 meters away from Long Haochun. Long Haochun did not dare to delay. He quickly unleashed the holy barrier again to protect himself and Yiting from the zombie's poison. The zombie king stared coldly at Long Haochun. "Get out of the way, human. What's in this cave? Just now, my subordinates sent me a message. They seem to have found something very dangerous here. I want to go in and take a look." Long Haochun was slightly stunned. It seemed that the zombie king did not know that Long Haoyue was here. He shook his head silently and said, "My partner is resting here. You can't disturb him. Please leave this place." The zombie king stared fiercely. Suddenly, it seemed to have thought of something. Could it be him? As it spoke, the green light emitted from its body suddenly became stronger. Then, it spat out a dark purple crystal from its mouth. The next moment, the dark purple crystal trembled violently, and circles of purple light spread out from it. The zombie king muttered something. Suddenly, the dark purple crystal spun around and instantly pointed at the cave behind Long Haochun. "Oh my God, it's really him!" The zombie king's expression did not change at all. This was a characteristic of zombies. However, at this moment, the green mist surrounding his body became obviously unstable. In a flash, he did not say anything to Long Haochun and directly pounced in his direction. When the zombie king spat out the purple crystal, Long Haochun had a premonition that something was wrong. He was already prepared for battle. Facing the zombie king's attack, he took half a step back. Suddenly, a golden light flashed in his eyes, and an intense golden-red flame instantly rose from his body. It was the fire of the sun, instant release. The scorching fire of the sun rose into the sky, followed by the roar of a dragon. Long Haochun held Light's punishment in his hand and directly launched Rising Dragon strike at the zombie king who was descending from the sky. Light restrained darkness, and holiness restrained death. In terms of attributes, Long Haochun definitely had the upper hand. When the golden-red fire of the sun came into contact with the zombie king, the dark green mist surrounding his body immediately evaporated. The zombie king did not have any weapons in his hands, but his arms were extremely long. Each of his fingers had green fingernails that were more than a foot long, and he went straight for Long Haochun. An ear-piercing collision sound rang in the air. Long Haochun, who was rushing up from below, collided with the zombie king who was descending from the sky. The violent explosion caused a large number of golden light spots to explode in the sky. At the moment of collision, Long Houchen felt an unparalleled and terrifying force crashing down on him. At this critical moment, the experience in the Tower of Eternity had given him shocking skills. His body slightly twisted by half a foot, and at the same time, his other hand on the brilliant Holy Shield activated the Holy Shield technique. It bombarded the Zombie King from the side, and he himself also avoided the opponent's most powerful attack by dodging the opponent's attack. Even so, Long Houchen's body was forcibly smashed down from the sky, and he slammed hard on the ground. The huge impact forcefully smashed a deep pit where Long Houchen had landed halfway up the mountain. One must know that the place was full of rocks. However, the Zombie King did not seem to have it easy either. Long Houchen's attack contained not only the fire of the sun, but also the holy light fire. The two powerful holy light fire and light fire almost instantly spread to the Zombie King's entire body. After the Zombie King's swooping body was blocked, it immediately let out a blood-curdling scream. Then, it crazily spat out large mouthfuls of green liquid, spraying it on its body in an attempt to extinguish the burning holy fire of light and fire of the sun. However, as a favored one, how could the holy light fire released by Long Houchen be extinguished so easily? The Zombie King felt that it was not only his body that was being burned, but even his soul. For a moment it dared not pursue Long Houchen anymore. Instead, it directly leaped backward and landed in the midst of the zombies that had already started to climb up the mountain. It pulled two zombies over and instantly tore their bodies apart. Rich soul waves and dark green liquid drenched its body, and the two types of flames dimmed significantly. The Zombie King repeated the same method and killed more than 20 of its subordinates before the two types of flames were completely extinguished. This was the attribute of a favored one. If Long Houchen was facing an opponent with the light attribute or an opponent that was not restrained by the light attribute, his advantage in attributes would be greatly reduced, although it would still be there. However, he was facing an undead creature that was most afraid of the light and holy light. That's right, just like what Yiting had said, this Zombie King was at least in the 8th stage. It should not have reached the 9th stage yet, but it was still a terrifying powerhouse at the peak of the 8th stage. However, such a powerhouse was obviously afraid after being burned by Long Houchen's two types of flames, and actually did not dare to give chase. However, Long Houchen was not in a good condition either. He felt that his arms were about to break, and there was not a single bone in his body that was different. His bones, meridians, and even his internal organs were groaning in pain. The Zombie King's strength was too terrifying. Even though he had made the best response, he was still almost killed by the absolute power of the Zombie King. Long Houchen clearly knew that the Zombie King's strength was much stronger than Abao's. Moreover, it seemed to be a pure strength-type undead creature. This caused Long Houchen to be under a lot of pressure. After all, he was not a strength-type knight. Although his external spiritual power was not weak, it was insufficient compared to the Zombie King in front of him. However, at this moment, Long Houchen could not show any weakness. Seeing the Zombie King's actions when he fell into the crowd of zombies, he immediately understood that the Zombie King was afraid of his attribute. He gritted his teeth and did not let himself show any signs of weakness. The intense fire of the sun rose again, and it was even more intense than before. Yiting's incantation was also completed at this moment. A strange golden-red halo instantly appeared on top of Long Houchen's head, then slowly descended and enveloped his body. In an instant, the brilliant holy armor on Long Houchen's body completely turned golden-red. The fire of the sun around his body no longer rose and danced, but turned into a golden-red liquid, directly forming a halo around his body. This liquid halo was like a moat that surrounded and protected the city, rotating slowly. The light elements around Long Houchen's body were so dense that the area within a radius of tens of square meters had turned into a faint golden color. The zombie king took a deep breath. It could feel that this human's strength was far inferior to its own. However, this human's light attribute was something it had never seen before. It was really too powerful. It really did not know what would happen if its body was stained with that golden red liquid. It was afraid that its soul would be severely injured. With so many minions around, even though the zombie king really wanted to kill Long Houchen, it valued its own life more. It immediately stopped charging forward, and instead commanded its minions to charge towards Long Houchen. Just as Yiting had said, zombies were indeed much stronger than skeletons. These zombies quickly rushed up the mountainside, but as soon as they approached the light aura around Long Houchen's body, their speed immediately slowed down. However, they would still slowly jump towards Long Houchen, attempting to attack him. Yiting could clearly feel the state of Long Houchen's body. She knew that Long Houchen needed to cast spells to recover. Her figure flashed, and in an instant she appeared beside him. She pointed the wand in her hand forward, and the most ordinary light arrows continuously flew out from the tip of the wand. Each arrow was aimed at the zombies' heads, because that was the place where their souls were gathered. Instantly, streaks of golden light flew across the mountainside, and one after another, zombies were destroyed by Yiting's light arrows. In the face of this kind of light magic, they could not resist at all. Yiting's gaze was fixed on the zombie king, who was commanding his minions in the midst of the horde of zombies. The reason why she did not use any powerful magic was to guard against the zombie king's sudden attack. Long Houchen had a buffer, and hurriedly adjusted the spiritual power in his body. After his awakening, his strength had once again greatly increased, but he still had not adapted to it. Moreover, he had suddenly encountered a powerful existence like the zombie king, which was why he had suffered such a big loss. Fortunately, after this awakening, his external spiritual power had also improved greatly. Otherwise, he would have lost the ability to fight just now. After a simple stretch of his body, Long Houchen immediately felt much more comfortable. The rich light elements in his body quickly healed his injuries. His combat power had quickly recovered to more than 80%. In a flash, Long Houchen took a step forward and appeared in front of the zombies. The light's punishment in his hand once again swept out. It was still the light severing sword, but this time it was the light severing sword coupled with light ripple. In an instant, at least 10 zombies were cut in half by the light severing sword. However, a terrifying scene followed. Although these zombies' bodies had been cut in half, their severed bodies were still crawling on the ground and attacking Long Houchen. What a strong life force! Long Houchen was alarmed. Yiting hurriedly said, "Their vitals are in their heads. The other parts can't be fatal." Okay. Long Houchen agreed, and the light's punishment in his hand flashed again. This time, it was replaced by the demon destruction flash. It accurately pierced the heads of the zombies, destroying their soul fire. The zombies' defense was not something the skeletons could compare to. Their heads were very hard. Yiting's light arrows were even more effective than Long Houchen's demon destruction flash. This was because she always chose the position of the zombies' eyes. However, after Long Houchen made his move, he immediately felt a great threat from the zombie king. Naturally, he did not dare to put more effort into dealing with the ordinary zombies. Thus, he could not focus on dealing with them. Sometimes, when the demon destruction flash pierced the zombies' frontal bones, it was actually unable to penetrate their heads. He had to follow up with another attack. However, it was impossible for these zombies to harm Long Houchen. The magic that Yiting cast on Long Houchen was called the Ring of the Sun. It was a powerful level 6 light magic that combined offense and defense. In addition, Long Houchen and Yiting had powerful light attribute. Any zombies that came within a certain range of Long Houchen would be directly burned by the Ring of the Sun. Their bodies would quickly turn into a pile of ashes. Every time a zombie was burned, the intensity of the light elements on the Ring of the Sun would weaken. The number of zombies increased. Moreover, the powerful zombies that Yiting had mentioned before were gradually appearing. The vengeful spirits of the zombies were extremely fast and could launch spiritual attack. The most despicable thing about these zombies was that they were more intelligent than the other zombies. They actually did not take the initiative to attack Long Houchen and Yiting. Instead, they tried to bypass them and enter the cave. This undoubtedly greatly restricted Long Houchen's movements. He did not dare to leave the cave for even a moment. Moreover, these vengeful spirits of the zombies came and went like the wind. Because Long Houchen could not leave the cave, his demon destruction flash was sometimes unable to hit these vengeful spirits of the zombies. Other than the vengeful spirits of the zombies, the enemies that Long Houchen and the rest were facing had also turned into metal zombies. These metal zombies were very obvious. There were gray iron zombies, bronze-colored copper zombies, silver zombies, and the most terrifying metal zombies. The reason why the metal zombies were so terrifying was that they could actually use some undead magic. These undead magic spells were not weak. Moreover, they were long-range attack. Long Houchen did not have the energy to rush out and kill them. The iron zombies were at least at the 4th level, the copper zombies were at the 5th level, the silver zombies were at the 6th level for close combat, and the metal zombies were at the 6th level for long-range attack. These powerful zombies attacked together, making it more and more difficult for Long Houchen to deal with them. However, although these zombies were strong and Long Houchen could withstand them for a while, the ones that he hated the most were the purplish-red zombies with big bellies. Only 2 of these zombies had appeared. However, these 2 had almost broken through his and Yiting's combined defense. These zombies were not fast and did not directly participate in the attack. In fact, they were directly thrown by the metal zombies towards Long Houchen. When Long Houchen's attack landed on the first purplish-red zombie, its body actually exploded instantly. A large amount of purplish-red liquid splattered all over the sky. The ring of the sun on Long Houchen's body actually disappeared under the corrosion of this purplish-red liquid. Without the protection of the ring of the sun, Long Houchen was immediately surrounded by danger. He had no choice but to use the fighting-slaying revolving sword to force the surrounding zombies to retreat. When the second purplish-red zombie flew over, because Yiting could not dodge in time, a few drops of the purplish-red liquid fell on her body. She immediately screamed in pain, and the light around her body intensified. However, her aura was clearly weakening. She had actually suffered quite a heavy injury. This was the exploding poison zombie. Long Houchen finally knew. After Yiting called out this name, she gritted her teeth and retreated, quickly dispersing the poison on her body. The purplish-red poison was very tyrannical. Even the rocks on the ground were corroded to the point of forming dent. Moreover, it was accompanied by an extremely unpleasant smell. What was more frightening was that it could even corrode spiritual power. The holy light barrier that Long Houchen had cast, the rippling light of light, couldn't resist the corrosion at all. After the appearance of the 2 exploding poison zombies, Long Houchen and Yiting's situation had become precarious. However, at this time, Long Houchen's combat power was fully displayed. The brilliant holy shield in his left hand blocked the attack, while the light of retribution in his right hand killed a zombie every time he attacked. Dense light elements were constantly bursting out of his body, as if his spiritual power was inexhaustible. In front of him were 4 silver zombies. These silver zombies had extremely tough silver bodies. Even the light of retribution, which was a counter to their attributes, could only leave a mark on their bodies. Moreover, these high-level zombies were very shrewd. Once Long Houchen used a powerful skill similar to the holy sword, these silver zombies would immediately pull a zombie to their back to block the attack while they quickly retreated. However, fortunately, there were not many gold and silver zombies. Up until now, only 4 of each had appeared. Even so, Long Houchen was beginning to find it more and more difficult to deal with them. If not for Haoyue and the Zombie King, who was commanding the zombies to attack from afar, Long Houchen was confident that he could kill these 8 powerful zombies. However, how could there be so many if stabbing, charge, ready, these were skills that Long Houchen couldn't use at all. He mostly used divine block and continuous block, followed by shield block, a light severing sword, and other very practical skills that consumed little spiritual power. But even so, his spiritual power was constantly being consumed. Long Houchen could even vaguely see that the Zombie King was quietly approaching the battlefield, obviously looking for an opportunity to give him a fatal blow. With a cold snort, the light of retribution in Long Houchen's right hand once again transformed into a tyrannical demon flash. Whenever he launched such an attack, the silver zombies were very resourceful. Each of them would directly pull 2 ordinary zombies to block Long Houchen's attack. It was difficult for the light of sacred fire to fall on these silver zombies. Even if the power of the light of sacred fire touched their bodies, the gold zombies behind them would immediately use the bodies of other zombies to help them extinguish the fire. Their coordination was very good. Therefore, although Long Houchen killed a lot of zombies, the pressure he had to bear was increasing. Chapter 119. A pitch-black light would often appear in front of Long Houchen. That was the metal zombies' necromancy magic. The metal zombies did not have many types of magic, but their attack power was quite tyrannical. Long Houchen could only rely on the brilliant Holy Shield in his left hand to continuously cast the Holy Shield technique. How much longer do you need to complete your evolution? Long Houchen sighed in his heart, but his gaze became more resolute. He could only defend and could not display his full strength. However, he could not give up on the cave entrance either. What should I do? What should I do now? At this time, Yiting finally dissolved the explosive poison zombies' poison and joined the battle once again. Moreover, the moment she joined the battle, she immediately released a powerful magic. It was the star rain that was used to deal with the skeleton army. Terrifying starlight blossomed in the sky. After crashing down, even the strong bodies of the zombies could not withstand the power of the star rain. The Zombie King, who was already prepared to launch a sneak attack, could only passively defend against the star rain. It temporarily gave up on the idea of launching a sneak attack on Long Houchen. However, the metal zombies, silver zombies, and even the copper zombies and iron zombies had the same method of defending against such a powerful magic. They used the bodies of their companions. After the terrifying meteor rain fell, at least 200 zombies lost their lives. However, the main force of the zombies was still there. Moreover, Long Houchen just happened to see 3 purplish-red, explosive poison zombies slowly climbing up to the waist of the mountain. This cannot continue. If the 3 explosive poison zombies were to display their power, he and Yiting would not be able to withstand it. Thinking of this, Long Houchen finally made a move. A dense golden light suddenly blossomed from his chest. Then, 3 golden lights shot out from his chest. The zombies were used to seeing Long Houchen's strength, so they hurriedly dodged, fearing that it might be some kind of powerful magic. 3 figures emerged from the golden light and quickly stood in front of Long Houchen. The 3 people who were sent over were Wang Yuanyuan, Lin Xian, and Han Yu. "Boss, what's going on?" Lin Xian couldn't help but ask as soon as he appeared. Long Houchen shouted in a deep voice, "Let's fight the enemy with all our strength first." As he spoke, he took a step forward and rushed towards the zombie horde. His companions had just been summoned here, so they needed time to adapt to their surroundings. With them guarding the cave entrance, he could finally rush out and kill his way out. After being suppressed for so long, Long Houchen was like a ferocious tiger that had been let out of its cage, or a volcano that had erupted. Light's retribution. As he focused all his spiritual energy, this glorious greatsword immediately released the light of the holy sword. The equipment came with its own skill. Long Houchen's toes touched the ground, and the 4 wings on his back suddenly flapped and quickly folded behind him. His whole body shot out like an arrow. His movements were simply too fast. With the help of his four wings, his speed was almost at its peak. He passed through the gap between the two silver zombies. Immediately after, he saw two dazzling balls of light blossom behind the two silver zombies. Holy sword version of the glorious sun slash. The silver zombies were worthy of being called the zombie with the highest defense aside from the zombie king. Long Houchen's attack, which combined two skills, was unable to cut them in half. Even so, it left a terrifying wound on each of their backs. What was even more frightening was that the intense holy fire erupted from their bodies like a volcano. Even the zombie king was afraid of Long Houchen's radiant sacred fire. After being struck by him at such a close distance, the two silver zombies let out miserable shrieks as green smoke rose from their bodies. They staggered backwards, and it seemed that their battle prowess had been greatly reduced. And this was only the beginning. Long Houchen's two slashes were extremely fast, but his body was still fast under the impact of the four wings. In a flash, he appeared behind the three exploding poison zombies. Moreover, he directly passed them by a distance of 10 meters. Light's retribution suddenly pointed in the air, and three tiny white lights quietly stuck to the bodies of the three exploding poison zombies. Immediately after, a violent explosion sounded. The bodies of the three exploding poison zombies ruptured and exploded. Large amounts of purplish-black liquid sprayed in all directions. At this moment, the liquid that they sprayed could only fall on the bodies of the surrounding zombies. The poisonous liquid did not distinguish between friend and foe. Immediately, a large number of zombies fell to the ground amidst the rising purplish-black poisonous fog. Among them were two iron zombies. The reason why Long Houchen was able to accomplish his goal like a fish in water was closely related to Yiting's star rain. The powerful 7th grade spell caused the remaining zombies to be mostly elite zombies. The ordinary zombies had yet to catch up. Otherwise, Long Houchen would not have had so much room to display his skills. But at this moment, he clearly did not intend to let go. At this time, the Zombie King also made his move. The Zombie King had been waiting for an opportunity. It was not easy for it to cultivate. After the first attack, it did not want to consume too much of its energy. Since it had so many underlings, why not use them? At this moment, seeing that the situation was not good, the pair of asymmetrical wings on its back suddenly flapped, and it charged towards Long Houchen. Long Houchen revealed a cold smile. Although he could not completely control his four wings, he could still use some simple technique. The four wings that were previously retracted suddenly spread out, and the increased air resistance caused his charging body to abruptly stop. Long Houchen kicked the chest of an iron zombie in front of him, sending it flying towards the Zombie King. At the same time, his four wings flapped again, but this time, it was in the opposite direction, and he rushed back. His body flipped in the process of rapidly retreating, and the circular sword of battle killing erupted once again. Everywhere it passed, a golden radiance flashed. The terrifying radiant holy fire combined with the power of the holy sword temporarily maintained by Light's punishment was truly invincible. Even the two powerful gold and silver zombies hurriedly retreated. However, there were even more zombies that were unable to dodge. Just like that, at least 20 zombies that were iron rank or above fell under Long Houchen's sword, and this did not include the 3 explosive poison zombies. Although the situation was unclear, with Long Houchen facing the enemy, after a short buffer, Han Yu, Lin Xian, and Wang Yuanyuan were also ready for battle. Han Yu and Wang Yuanyuan blocked the entrance of the cave, while Lin Xian retreated to Yiting's side. Wang Yuanyuan had already smashed the Divine Soul shield in her hands. With an ear-piercing whistle, several zombies that were close to her were directly sent flying. The huge shield whistled in a circle and returned to her hands. Immediately after, Wang Yuanyuan fired a Skysplitter cannon. The Skysplitter cannon hit a silver zombie that Long Houchen had previously slashed. The silver zombie was already heavily injured, and after being bombarded by the skysplitter cannon, it could no longer hold on and was directly blasted out of the mountain. Han Yu was not idle either. The light reflection shield was placed in front of him, and the spiritual wings on his back spread out to form a stable defense. Any zombies that rushed over would be directly sent flying by the recoil of the shield. He was perfectly carrying out his duty to protect the night. Lin Xian looked at the large number of zombies outside and could not help but mutter, "So many, what is this thing?" Although he said that, his movements were not slow. Seeing that Long Houchen was rushing back, a wall of fire fell behind Long Houchen, blocking the zombies that wanted to chase after him. Immediately after that, the fire spell attached to the fire crystal staff blasted out, targeting another heavily injured silver zombie. After the fusion of the two spiritual stoves, Lin Xian's own flames had undergone great changes. His original flames were crimson, but now his flames had become dark blue. Even the fire spell had become a dark blue skull-shaped flame. Under the double burning of the light sacred fire and Lin Xian's heart flame, the silver zombie was trapped inside and outside, and finally turned into a pile of ashes. Ever since the 21st General Grade Monster Hunters had formed their team, the 7 of them had experienced too many battles, and their teamwork was very good. Even though their cultivation had just risen to the 6th order, and they still needed time to adapt, in the face of this sudden battle, they displayed exquisite teamwork. Long Houchen returned to Han Yu's side, and Han Yu took the initiative to step forward, temporarily becoming the most important defensive force, giving Long Houchen time to breathe. At this time, seeing that its strong subordinates had died one after another, the Zombie King finally could not hold back and rushed over in a frenzy. However, this time, it had learned its lesson and did not rush over empty-handed. In its left hand was an iron zombie, and in its right hand was an exploding poison zombie. Lin Xian, destroy the purplish-red zombie in his right hand. Long Houchen shouted, and the 4 wings on his back spread out. At the same time, a golden light fell on his body from behind, illuminating the heaven and earth. Yiting's support had arrived, and dense light attribute spiritual power quickly poured into Long Houchen's body, replenishing his own consumption. At the same time, a white light shot out from Yiting's chest, hitting the Zombie King's body. Saint Spiritual Stove. However, the Saint Spiritual Stove that Yiting had used, unexpectedly had Long Houchen as the main body. In other words, the enemy that was hit by the Saint Spiritual Stove would still attack Long Houchen. Of course, it would be more accurate to say that the Saint Spiritual Stove no longer existed, and it should be said that it was Yiting's traction skill. "Watch me destroy it!" Lin Xian shouted excitedly. Then, a strange energy fluctuation emitted from the backs of Long Houchen, Han Yu, and Wang Yuan. The 3 of them suddenly felt the air around them ripple like water, and an indescribable burning sensation made the blood in their bodies feel like it was about to boil. Immediately after, a loud and clear phoenix cry suddenly rang out, and a ray of azure light flashed over their heads, heading straight for the Zombie King that was rushing over. What was that? Long Houchen, Han Yu, and Wang Yuan were all stunned. The blue fire phoenix, with 3 dazzling tail feathers on its back, left a series of rippling, dazzling flame halos in the air, and almost instantly arrived in front of the Zombie King. In the next moment, the Zombie King let out a blood-curdling scream, and was actually forcibly stopped. The exploding poison zombie in its hand instantly burst, but the purplish-red poison didn't even have time to spread before it evaporated into poisonous gas under the high temperature. On the other side, the iron zombie actually melted. How terrifyingly high temperature was needed to achieve this? Long Houchen had personally experienced the toughness of the iron zombie's body. After the Zombie King's body was hit by the blue fire phoenix, it directly turned into a dark green color. Dense dark green fog continuously surged out from its body, resisting the blue flame's corrosion. At this moment, the blue fire phoenix flapped its wings, and a circle of dense blue flames spread out. A large number of ordinary zombies that had just reached the top of the mountain were enveloped by this ring of light. The zombies' advance came to an abrupt halt, and then they saw them melt one by one, turning into liquid, then into gas, and just like that, they disappeared. A resonant phoenix cry once again rang out. The fire phoenix retracted its wings, and in the midst of a violent explosion, it actually blasted the zombie king away. Then, it circled in the air, and once again flew towards Long Houchen's group. Seeing the zombie king in such a miserable state, Long Houchen's group of 3 couldn't help but change their expressions. Wang Yuanyuan couldn't help but shout, "Brother Yuyao, what are you doing?" However, to their surprise, the fire phoenix seemed to have already lost its temperature. It just flew over their heads, and when they turned back to look, it actually directly drilled into Lin Xian's chest and disappeared. "Spiritual stove?" the 3 of them exclaimed in unison. The only skill that could merge into a human's chest was a spiritual stove. They never would have thought that such a powerful and terrifying skill was actually Lin Xian's spiritual stove. Without a doubt, the blue fire phoenix was the result of his original 2 spiritual stoves fusing. Even with Long Houchen's knowledge of spiritual stoves, he didn't know that during the fusion of spiritual stoves, there was a compatibility factor. The higher the compatibility of the spiritual stove, the easier it would be to synthesize it. Furthermore, the power produced after the synthesis would also be stronger. The danger of spiritual stove fusion was in this compatibility factor. If the power of 2 spiritual stoves were equal, and the compatibility was 0, no matter how powerful their owners were, they would never be able to successfully fuse them. In the end, they would inevitably suffer a backlash. There were only 2 situations that could be fused. One was compatibility and the other was suppression. For example, Lin Xian and Han Yu's spiritual stove fusion was compatibility, but Long Houchen and Kaier's spiritual stove fusion was suppression. Long Houchen's light elemental fairy Yiting suppressed the saint's spiritual stove. As for Kaier, it was even more obvious. However, speaking of the most successful spiritual stove fusion, it was actually Lin Xian. The reason was very simple: his luck was really too good. The spiritual stove of the Heart of Flame that he cultivated and the spiritual stove of the Flaming Eagle that he obtained later had the greatest compatibility. It directly produced a strange evolutionary effect, and only then was his current spiritual stove, the Fire Phoenix, also known as the Heart of Flame Phoenix. The power of this spiritual stove was witnessed by Long Houchen and the others with their own eyes. Its explosive power was unexpectedly able to contend against the zombie king of the 8th level. Moreover, during the process of its explosive power, even a powerhouse of the 8th level like the zombie king couldn't do anything to it, and even suffered a small loss.